Hello, I'm Arthur Reed. Welcome to the World War II History Channel, where we explore the pivotal moments and untold stories of the greatest generation. Before the world broke, there was only the quiet dew resting on the wheat fields of late summer. Imagine, if you will, a morning so still you could hear the leaves breathing. It is the end of the harvest season. The air is just beginning to turn crisp, holding the faint, bittersweet promise of autumn. In a small, unnamed village near the border, the world is wrapped in a gentle, silver mist. It clings to the wooden fences and settles in the valleys, hiding the horizon. A baker is already awake. His hands are dusted with fine, white flour, working the dough just as his father did, and his father before him. The rhythm of his hands is a quiet prayer. The smell of yeast, warm wood smoke, and sweet grains fills the small, stone-walled room. It is a morning like any other. The family dog sleeps near the gentle heat of the stove, twitching in a dream. Upstairs, the children are still asleep under heavy, woolen blankets, their breathing slow and steady. There is a profound, ordinary peace covering the earth. But just beyond the edge of the mist, the ground begins to tremble. It is not a sudden, violent shaking. It is a low, steady hum that vibrates through the cobblestones, moving through the soles of the baker's boots. He pauses. He wipes his flour-dusted hands on his apron and steps outside into the cool, damp morning air. The mist is still thick, a pale curtain hiding the distance, but the sound grows. It is the sound of a storm that does not bring rain. It is the arrival of a machine. An idea born of arrogance, moving relentlessly across the quiet earth. Miles away, in the damp, shadowy forests, a young man sits against the trunk of an ancient oak tree. His uniform feels stiff, scratchy, and deeply unfamiliar. He has a stub of a pencil and a crumpled piece of paper resting on his knee. He is trying to write a letter to his mother. He does not write about the movements of armies or the grand, terrifying speeches being broadcast on the wireless radios in the city squares. He writes about the cold dampness of the moss beneath his boots. He asks if the apples in their backyard have ripened yet, and if the neighbor's cat has come back around. He tells her not to worry, that the birds are still singing in the canopy above him, even as the distant rumble grows louder. He is just a boy, caught in the shadow of a giant, unfeeling machine. His private fear is tucked quietly away, hidden behind soft words of comfort for the woman who raised him. The force that rolls into the mist that morning believes it is unstoppable. It is made of cold iron, calculated plans, and a blinding, terrible certainty. The people driving the machines, sitting in the cockpits of the planes casting sudden, dark shadows over the golden harvest, are wrapped in a kind of waking dream. They have been told they are the architects of a new dawn. They do not look down at the baker standing in his doorway. They do not see the boy beneath the oak tree. They only see a map. They only see lines on paper to be crossed and erased. This was the fatal flaw, born on the very first day. The belief that steel, speed, and noise could simply erase the quiet, beating heart of the world. As the morning sun slowly burns away the mist, the reality of the day settles over the land. The skies, usually reserved for soft clouds and the graceful migration of autumn birds, are suddenly filled with a deafening roar. In the cities, people stand on the sidewalks, looking up, shielding their eyes from the sun. The baker holds his wife's hand. They do not speak. There are no words for the suddenness of it all. The world has shifted on its axis, slipping into a long twilight. Yet, in that terrifying moment, there is also a profound, quiet reaching out. A neighbor gently taking the arm of an elder to guide them indoors. A mother pressing her child's face into her heavy coat, whispering soft, rhythmic words of safety into their hair. These are the microscopic acts of resistance that no tank can crush. The simple, unbreakable instinct to protect one another. It is a quiet heroism that does not win medals, but it is the very fabric of human survival. It is difficult, so many decades later, to truly grasp the texture of those days. The past can sometimes feel like a faded photograph, the edges curled, the colors muted, and the faces distant. We try to pull those moments closer, to understand the weight of the history that shaped the very ground we walk on today. When we hold a piece of that era, or when we watch the history meticulously and respectfully recreated on screen, the distance closes. The abstract numbers become human faces. If you have ever felt that pull to connect with the past, to see the visual history and honor the everyday people who lived through this monumental shift, there are beautiful ways to do so. I highly recommend spending an evening immersing yourself in this history through careful visual storytelling. On Amazon, you can find incredible World War II memorabilia that connects you physically to the past, or you can watch powerful, visually stunning films like Midway on Prime Video, which capture the sprawling, breathtaking reality of the war. It is a profound way to witness the courage of those who stood against the tide. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As that first long day bleeds into evening, a strange, bruised twilight falls over the land. The street lamps are not lit. The windows are darkened, covered in heavy cloth. Inside a small apartment, a family sits around a single, flickering candle. The father is reading a story aloud to his daughter. His voice is steady, smooth, and calming, even though his hands tremble just a fraction in the dim, golden light. He is reading a fairy tale, refusing to let the darkness outside steal the magic of her childhood. The walls of their home feel fragile, like thin paper against the immense weight of the night. But the love inside that room is a fortress. This is what the conquerors did not understand. They understood the mathematics of destruction. They understood the geometry of invasion. But they could not calculate the deep, quiet endurance of a father's love, or the comforting rhythm of a familiar story told in the dark. Out in the dark woods, the young soldier has finished his letter. He folds it carefully, smoothing the creases with his thumb, and tucks it into the breast pocket of his tunic, right over his heart. He pulls his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders. Around him, other boys are sleeping, their breaths forming small, white clouds in the chilled air. Some of them are softly murmuring in their dreams, calling out the names of people far away. The machines have halted for the night, resting like great, sleeping beasts in the valleys. But the boys are just boys. They are lonely, they are cold, and they are holding on to the memories of warm kitchens, soft laughter, and the gentle touch of a familiar hand. The baker lies awake in his bed, staring up at the shadowed ceiling. The smell of the morning sweet bread has long faded, replaced by the faint, acrid scent of exhaust and distant smoke hanging in the night air. He thinks of his flour, his yeast, his stone ovens. He wonders if he will bake tomorrow. He listens to the quiet breathing of his wife beside him. And then, slowly, a quiet resolve settles deep in his chest. Yes. He will bake. Because people must eat. Because life, even under the shadow of a falling sky, must continue its gentle rhythm. He will rise before the sun, just as he always has. He will light the fire. He will feed his community. It is his small, defiant promise to the dawn. This was the beginning of the great unraveling. The machine that rolled across the borders that late summer morning was vast, and it was terrible, and it seemed, to the eyes of a watching world, entirely invincible. It was built on the cold premise that power is the only truth. That loud, crushing force is all that matters. But history is not written by the machines. It is written by the quiet, enduring spirit of the people caught in their path. It is written by the baker who rises in the dark to knead dough. It is written by the father reading fairy tales by candlelight. It is written by the boy folding a letter to his mother in the freezing damp of a forest. The Axis powers looked at the world and saw only territory to be claimed, lines to be redrawn, and populations to be silenced. They did not see the millions of invisible threads connecting one human heart to another. They did not understand that when you push against the gentle, ordinary lives of people, you do not just break them. You awaken a quiet, desperate strength. A strength that does not roar, but whispers. A strength that waits in the mist, unseen, rooted deeply in the earth. As you drift into sleep tonight, let your mind rest on that quiet morning. Think of the dew on the wheat, and the silver mist rolling softly through the valleys. Think of the profound, simple courage it takes just to face a changed world and decide to keep living, to keep loving, to keep holding on to each other in the dark. The storm had arrived, yes. But the roots of the trees held fast in the soil. And the long, quiet struggle for the dawn had only just begun. Rest now. Let the quiet of the night surround you. High above the patchwork quilt of the countryside, the summer was leaving chalk-white scars across the perfect blue sky. It was, by the memories of those who lived it, one of the most achingly beautiful summers the island had ever seen. The meadows were thick with wildflowers, nodding lazily in the warm breeze. The rivers ran clear and cool beneath the shade of ancient weeping willows. If you stood in an empty field, close your eyes, and just listened to the rustle of the leaves, you could almost believe the world was entirely at peace. It felt like a season meant for quiet picnics, for reading poetry in the tall grass, for falling in love under the long, golden evenings. But the sky, so vast and inviting, had become a canvas for an entirely different kind of story. Up there, where the air grows thin and freezing, young men were dancing a desperate ballet. They were just boys, really. Boys who, only a few months prior, were worrying about university exams or helping their fathers in the shop. Now, their faces were marked by the deep, dark circles of profound exhaustion. They smelled constantly of hot engine oil, leather, and the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline. Imagine a young pilot sitting in a canvas deck chair on the edge of a grassy airfield. The afternoon sun is warm on his face. His eyes are closed, but he is not sleeping. He is listening. Every muscle in his back is tightly wound, waiting for the harsh ring of the telephone that will send him sprinting back to his machine. Beside him is a half-empty mug of tea, gone cold. He holds a crumpled envelope in his hand. A letter from his sweetheart. He has read it so many times the paper is wearing thin at the folds. She writes about the garden, about how the tomatoes are finally ripening on the vine, and how her little brother is learning to ride a bicycle. She does not write about the news on the wireless. She offers him a sanctuary of ordinary things, a quiet place his mind can rest when the roar of the engines finally stops. He tucks the letter safely into his breast pocket, close to his heart. It is his talisman. The invading force across the channel believed that power alone could break these boys. The architects of the advancing empire looked at their vast fleets of silver bombers, their endless rows of fighters, and calculated a swift, mathematically certain victory. They believed that if you fill the sky with enough noise, enough fire, and enough silver wings, the spirit of those below will simply crumble. But they did not account for the quiet, stubborn resilience of a boy who just wants to go home to a garden and see his sweetheart again. Every time the sirens wailed, these exhausted boys climbed back into their cockpits. They flew up into the blinding sun, their hands shaking from fatigue, driven not by a grand ideology, but by the simple, fiercely held desire to protect the soft, green world below them. And below them, in the sprawling, brick-lined heart of the city, the true friction of the war was being felt. When the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in bruised shades of purple and orange, the long, mournful wail of the sirens would begin. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in the teeth, a nightly lullaby of anxiety. The people of the city would emerge from their homes, carrying whatever pieces of comfort they could manage, a frayed woolen blanket, a thermos of warm soup, a favorite stuffed bear clutched in the hands of a sleepy child. They descended into the earth. Deep down into the cavernous, tiled tunnels of the underground railways. Close your eyes and imagine the feeling of that space. The air down there is cool, damp, and thick with the scent of unwashed clothes, ozone, and the faint, lingering smell of pipe tobacco. The platforms are crowded, thousands of bodies huddled close together on the hard concrete. The dim, yellow light casts long, trembling shadows against the curved tunnel walls. Above them, the earth shakes. A low, rhythmic thudding that dislodges tiny flakes of dust from the ceiling. Yet, in this dark, subterranean world, there is no panic. There is only a profound, hushed endurance. An elderly woman, wearing a neat but threadbare coat, carefully unscrews the cup of her thermos. She pours a small amount of weak, sugary tea and hands it to the stranger sitting next to her, a young mother whose eyes are wide with silent fear. No words are exchanged, only a gentle nod. Down the platform, a man softly plays a harmonica, the notes bending and echoing down the dark tunnel, offering a fragile melody to weave through the distant thudding of the night. A teenage girl reads a book by the light of a tiny pocket torch, her brother asleep with his head resting on her lap. They are holding on to their humanity in the dark. The grand, sweeping machine of the enemy was designed to terrify, to isolate, and to conquer. But every time a stranger shared a blanket, every time a comforting hand was placed on a trembling shoulder, the grand machine met a wall it could not break. You can shatter brick and mortar. You can burn timber and glass. But you cannot so easily dismantle the quiet solidarity of everyday people who have decided that they will not let each other fall. There is a profound difference between the polished stories we are often told of this era and the raw, unedited truth of what these people endured. To truly grasp the depth of their resilience, we must understand the unfiltered reality they faced, a reality that was often messy, exhausting, and deeply visceral. Because the stark imagery of this history is sometimes too harsh or sensitive for modern platforms to share openly, I have put together a special, uncensored collection of unseen media, featuring raw photographs and footage from the war, available over on Gumroad. It is a sobering, deeply moving window into the true face of the conflict, far away from the sanitized versions of history. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. When the long night finally ended, the all-clear siren would sound, a steady, single note that meant the sky was theirs once again. The people would rise from the damp floors of the underground. They would gather their blankets, take the hands of their children, and walk slowly up the stairs to meet the dawn. And what they saw was often heartbreaking. The streets they knew were changed. Familiar shops were reduced to smoking timber. The air was thick with the smell of plaster dust and broken water pipes. But then, the most remarkable thing would happen. A woman would find her front steps covered in rubble, but she would take a broom and simply begin to sweep. A baker, finding his windows blown out, would prop up a handwritten sign on a piece of cardboard, announcing that bread would still be ready by noon. The milkman, guiding his horse-drawn cart through the debris-littered streets, would still deliver glass bottles to the doorsteps that remained. It was a quiet, magnificent defiance. It was a refusal to let the chaos dictate the rhythm of their lives. They brushed the dust from their coats, boiled water for morning tea on tiny, makeshift stoves, and carried on. High above, the returning pilots would land their battered machines on the dewy grass. They would climb out, their legs heavy, their faces smeared with oil and soot. They would walk into the mess hall, pour a cup of tea, and look at the empty chairs. They would write another letter. They would try to catch a few hours of dreamless sleep before the telephone rang again. The summer slowly turned. The leaves on the oak trees began to curl and brown at the edges, drifting down to rest on the quiet earth. And the invading force, looking across the water, slowly realized a terrifying truth. Their silver wings, for all their speed and fury, were not enough. Their unbreakable machine was stalling. It was stalling against the soft, yielding, yet entirely immovable spirit of a people who simply refused to be broken. The hubris of the conqueror is believing that everything can be quantified. That enough bombs, enough planes, and enough fear will inevitably equal surrender. They looked at the island and saw a vulnerability to be exploited. They did not see the grandmother's thermos of tea. They did not hear the harmonica in the tunnel. They did not know about the letter tucked safely in the breast pocket of an exhausted boy in the sky. These are the unseen forces that turn the tide of history. The quiet, gentle, fiercely protective love that ordinary people hold for their homes, for their neighbors, and for the simple right to live in peace. As the autumn winds began to blow, carrying away the last of the summer's warmth, the first great crack in the Axis machine had formed. Not by a superior weapon, but by the steady, unyielding beating of the human heart. Let the quiet heroism of those days settle over you now. Think of the peace they fought so hard to hold on to. Let your own mind find a quiet, safe harbor. The night is still, the sky is clear, and you are safe. Rest now. Breathe slowly, and let the gentle dark carry you into peace. The horizon simply swallowed them whole, an endless ocean of pale, trembling grass that stretched far beyond the edges of the known world. When the great march eastward began, the air was still thick with the golden dust of late summer. The marching songs of the young men echoed across the endless plains, carrying the buoyant, careless energy of those who believe they are invincible. They walked under a vast, unblinking sun, their boots kicking up clouds of dry earth that settled on their shoulders like a soft, brown snow. They had been told this would be a brief journey. A swift, decisive stroke across the map, finished before the leaves had even finished falling from the birch trees. But maps, drawn in warm, brightly lit rooms by men who have never felt the bite of the open wind, are deeply deceptive things. A map cannot show you the sheer, overwhelming emptiness of the steppe. It cannot show you how the sky here seems too large, pressing down on the earth with a heavy, solitary weight. Slowly, as the weeks bled into one another, the singing began to fade. The dust turned to a thick, clinging mud that grabbed at the soles of their boots and held fast to the heavy wheels of their wagons. It was an exhaustion that seeped into the very marrow of their bones. And then, one quiet morning, the rain stopped, the mud hardened, and the air grew entirely still. A young soldier, barely old enough to grow a shadow on his chin, steps out of his canvas tent into the pale dawn. He looks down at his boots. The mud that had trapped them the night before has turned pale white. He takes a step, and the ground beneath him crumbles with a sharp, crystalline crunch. It is the first frost. It is beautiful, in a fragile, terrifying way. The blades of grass are coated in delicate, silver armor, shimmering in the weak morning light. He wraps his thin, cotton summer tunic a little tighter around his chest. He was not given a winter coat. None of them were. The men who planned this grand conquest simply did not believe the cold would arrive before the victory. This is where the arrogance of the empire met its truest adversary. Not an army of men, at first, but the quiet, undeniable reality of nature herself. The land was defending its people. As the days shorten, the shadows grow long and blue across the plains. The frost thickens into snow. It falls silently, covering the scars of the march in a soft, white blanket. The world becomes a study in silence. The great, roaring machines of the invading force, the tanks and the trucks that were meant to conquer the earth, begin to cough and sputter. The oil inside them turns thick and sluggish, freezing solid in the metal veins of the engines. The invincible steel beasts become nothing more than heavy, useless monuments sitting quietly in the drifting snow. In the evenings, the young men huddle together in whatever hollows they can find in the earth. They light small, desperate fires, keeping the flames low so as not to be seen in the vast, dark ocean of the night. Imagine that young boy again. He is sitting as close to the meager warmth as he dares. His hands are cracked and red, his fingers numb. He has wrapped his boots in layers of old newspaper and torn rags, tying them with rough twine to keep the frostbite at bay. In his lap rests a small piece of paper. He holds a pencil with a stiff, clumsy grip. He is writing a letter to his older sister. He closes his eyes for a moment, trying to summon the memory of her warm kitchen, the smell of cinnamon and baked apples, the sound of the kettle whistling on the stove. He breathes out, a long plume of white mist in the freezing air, and he begins to write. He does not tell her about the relentless, biting wind that feels like glass against his cheeks. He does not tell her about the fear that gnaws at his stomach, or how the vastness of the land makes him feel like a tiny, forgotten speck in the universe. Instead, he lies. He writes, "The snow here is very beautiful. It sparkles like crushed diamonds in the morning. I am staying warm. Please tell Mother not to worry, and keep a seat by the hearth for me." He folds the paper, his numb fingers moving slowly. It is a small act of profound love. He is carrying a terrible, freezing burden, and he refuses to let it touch the people he loves far away. This quiet resilience, this desperate holding onto humanity in the face of an inhuman landscape, is a story that history books often overlook in favor of grand strategies and sweeping arrows on a page. In the small, wooden villages they pass through, the people watch them from behind frosty window panes. These are the people the grand machine came to conquer, yet the reality on the ground is far more complex, woven with sudden, startling moments of shared humanity. An old woman, her face lined with the deep wisdom of a life lived close to the harsh earth, steps out of her small home. She wears a thick, woolen shawl wrapped tightly around her head and shoulders. She watches a column of shivering, exhausted boys trudge past her gate. They are the enemy. But in this frozen twilight, they are also just freezing, hungry children far from their mothers. She reaches into her deep pocket, pulls out a single, bruised potato she had baked in the ashes of her stove, and quietly presses it into the trembling hand of a passing soldier. He stops. He looks at her, his eyes wide and bright with unshed tears. He nods, just once, a silent transmission of profound gratitude before he is swallowed back into the moving line of gray coats. It is these microscopic, quiet moments that reveal the true fabric of the world. The grand empires try to turn men into machines, to strip away their softness and replace it with cold, unfeeling obedience. But the human heart is stubbornly tender. Even in the deepest frost, it reaches out for warmth. Gathering these quiet whispers from the past, finding the letters written with numb fingers, and uncovering the fleeting moments of grace in a landscape of sorrow, takes a special kind of gentle dedication. It is a solitary journey through countless fading archives, deciphering the delicate handwriting on crumbling paper, so that these everyday heroes are not buried forever beneath the snows of time. If you find peace in these quiet human stories and wish to help me continue the long, solitary research it takes to bring them to you, I would be deeply honored by your support over on Ko-Fi. Even a small tip, as low as $1, acts as a warm lantern in the dark, allowing me the time to carefully piece together these fragile memories. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the winter deepens, the sky turns the color of a bruised pearl. The wind begins to sing a low, mournful note through the bare branches of the distant forests. The snow no longer falls in gentle flakes, but sweeps across the plains in harsh, blinding waves. The invading army, once a proud, unstoppable tide, is now completely adrift in a white, featureless sea. They dig trenches not to fight, but merely to hide from the relentless wind. They wrap themselves in anything they can find: stolen curtains, women's woolen coats, sacks of straw. The great leaders in their distant, heated offices issue orders to push forward, to conquer the cold, to ignore the frostbite and the exhaustion. But you cannot command the winter. You cannot shoot the snow. The hubris of the Axis was a blinding light that kept them from seeing the truth of the earth. They believed their will was stronger than the turning of the seasons. But as the young boys huddled together in the freezing dark, listening to the wind howl over their heads, they understood the reality that their leaders refused to see. The land was too vast, the cold too deep, and the spirit of the people they sought to break was rooted far beneath the frost, where the warmth of the earth still held strong. Think of the stillness of a snowy night. How the falling snow acts as a heavy blanket, absorbing all the sharp noises of the world, leaving only a hushed, gentle quiet. That is the quiet that eventually settled over the great eastern plains. It was a tragic, heavy peace, bought with the endurance of millions of ordinary souls who were asked to bear the unbearable weight of an arrogant empire's mistake. As you lie there now, safe and warm beneath your own blankets, let the quiet of the night surround you. Feel the comforting weight of the warmth that protects you. The struggles of those frozen days are far in the past, fading into the gentle mists of history. The winds that swept across the steppe have settled. The boys who shivered in the dark are at rest. Let your breathing slow, matching the gentle, steady falling of the snow in your mind's eye. Soft, quiet, and peaceful. There is no journey you need to make tonight. There is no cold you need to brave. You are safe. You are warm. Let the soft, hushed whispers of the past gently carry you away, drifting down into a deep and dreamless sleep. Rest now. Let the quiet take you. Even in paradise, the shadows of the world eventually find their way to the shore. Imagine a Sunday morning so quiet, so perfectly still, that the only sound is the gentle, rhythmic breathing of the ocean against the land. It is early, just after dawn, in a place where the air always feels like a warm, soft embrace. The water in the great harbor is a smooth sheet of glass, reflecting the pale, golden hues of the rising sun. A light breeze carries the sweet, delicate scent of blooming hibiscus and the faint, familiar salt of the sea. It is a morning built for rest, for deep breaths, and for the simple, quiet joy of being alive. On the deck of a great, gray ship anchored in the calm water, a young sailor is awake before the rest of his crew. He sits on a coiled rope, a wooden writing board resting on his knees. In his hand, he holds a fountain pen, the nib hovering just above a piece of pale blue stationery. He is thousands of miles away from home, but in his mind, he is walking down a familiar dirt road in the heart of the mainland. He is writing a letter to his mother. He describes the strange, vibrant colors of the tropical birds that land on the railings. He tells her how much he misses the smell of the pine trees in their backyard, and he asks if the autumn leaves have begun to fall back home. He tries to imagine the crisp, biting chill of a December morning, but the tropical sun is already warming his shoulders, wrapping him in a drowsy, peaceful comfort. He signs his name with a gentle flourish, folds the paper carefully, and slips it into an envelope. He looks up at the sky, a vast, unbroken dome of innocent blue, completely unaware that the world as he knows it is about to end. The peace of that morning was not broken by a sudden, angry storm of nature, but by the cold, calculated arrival of machines. When the low, distant hum first began to vibrate through the warm air, many of the men simply looked up in mild curiosity. The sound was like a swarm of heavy bees, growing louder, turning into a deep, vibrating roar that shook the calm surface of the water. And then, the shadows fell. We will not dwell on the fire, or the noise, or the sudden, overwhelming chaos that shattered the glass-like water of the harbor. We will look, instead, at the quiet, profound moments of humanity that bloomed in the center of the dark. Think of the older sailor, a man who had spent his life on the water, grabbing the shoulder of a terrified young boy and pulling him to the safety of a steel bulkhead, wrapping his own body around the youth as the world shook. Think of the nurses in the quiet, whitewashed halls of the nearby hospital, their Sunday routines instantly vanishing, their hands moving with a sudden, desperate grace to comfort those who were brought through the doors. They did not have time to be afraid. They simply reached out, touching foreheads, holding hands, whispering soft words of reassurance into the deafening noise. The architects of this sudden arrival believed they were striking a fatal blow against steel and iron. They looked at their maps, measuring the distance across the vast, blue ocean, and calculated that a single, devastating warning would break the spirit of a sleeping giant. They believed that if they crippled the great ships resting in the harbor, the people far across the water would simply close their doors, draw their curtains, and retreat into the safety of their vast continent. But they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the giant they were waking. Thousands of miles away, on the mainland, it is a quiet Sunday afternoon. The autumn air is sharp and cold, smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. Outside the windows of a small, warmly lit living room, the last leaves of the season are falling from the oak trees, drifting down in slow, lazy spirals to rest on the frost-hardened ground. A family is gathered in the parlor. The father is sitting in his favorite armchair, the Sunday newspaper resting on his lap. The mother is knitting by the fireplace, the rhythmic click of her needles providing a soothing, familiar soundtrack to the afternoon. Their teenage son is lying on the rug, listening to a symphony playing softly from the large, wooden cabinet radio in the corner. The room is filled with the scent of roasted root vegetables and the warm, golden light of table lamps. It is the absolute picture of safety. And then, the music stops. There is a crackle of static, and a voice fills the room. It is a voice carrying news from the warm, blue waters halfway across the world. Watch the mother's hands stop their knitting. Watch the father slowly lower his newspaper, his eyes meeting his wife's across the distance of the room. The silence that fills the space between them is heavy, thick with a sudden, unspoken understanding. The world has fractured. The ocean is no longer a protective moat, it is a bridge, and the storm has crossed it. The mother looks down at her son on the rug. He is looking up at the radio, his youthful face shifting from confusion to a dawning, solemn realization. The mother feels a sudden, piercing chill in her chest. She knows, with the deep, quiet intuition of a parent, that the days of simple Sunday afternoons are over. Her boy, who was just learning to drive, who just asked the neighbor's daughter to the autumn dance, is suddenly standing on the edge of a vast, terrifying unknown. This was the fatal miscalculation of the Axis powers. They counted the battleships. They counted the airplanes. They measured the gallons of fuel and the tons of ammunition. But they did not count the millions of quiet living rooms. They did not measure the fierce, protective love of a mother, or the steady, quiet resolve of a father putting down his newspaper. When you strike a sleeping giant, it does not cower. It opens its eyes. The Monday morning that followed was unlike any the world had ever seen. The factory towns, which had lain quiet and dormant over the weekend, suddenly thrummed with a new, vibrating energy. It wasn't the frantic, chaotic energy of panic. It was a slow, deliberate, and entirely unstoppable awakening. Men who had spent their lives farming quiet, lonely acres of wheat-packed small suitcases, kissed their wives goodbye, and walked down the dirt roads toward the recruiting stations. Women, who had only ever known the soft, familiar routines of home, tied their hair up in bandanas, put on heavy canvas trousers, and walked into the cavernous, echoing halls of the steel mills and aircraft factories. They picked up welding torches and riveting guns. Their hands, once used to kneading dough and mending torn collars, learned the hard, heavy rhythm of building the machines that would save the world. There is a profound beauty in this collective rising. It is a reminder that history is not just made by generals moving pieces on a board. It is made by the countless, invisible decisions of ordinary people who look at a darkening sky and decide, together, that they will not let the light go out. They did not ask for the storm, but they stood in the rain and built an umbrella vast enough to cover the earth. When we look back at these moments, at the way everyday lives were swept up in the great, swirling currents of history, it is natural to want to understand them more deeply. We long to look past the grand narratives and find the quiet, human truths hidden in the margins. To read the letters, to see the unblurred faces of the past, and to share those discoveries with others who feel the same deep reverence for the people who lived through it. If you find comfort in these quiet explorations and wish to dive deeper into the raw, uncensored history, I invite you to join our gentle community over on Patreon. There, we share free podcasts, unblurred historical footage, and deep dive reflections in a peaceful, thoughtful space, far away from the noise of the modern internet. There is also a small tip jar if you wish to support the long, quiet hours of research that bring these stories to light. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As that fateful Sunday drew to a close, the sun began to set over the mainland. The shadows of the bare trees stretched long and thin across the lawns. The street lamps flickered to life, casting pools of warm, yellow light into the gathering dark. The world was entirely different than it had been when the sun rose. A deep, heavy sorrow had settled over the continent, a collective mourning for the peace that was lost in the warm waters of the Pacific. But beneath the sorrow, there was a steady, beating pulse. It was the pulse of millions of hearts beating in unison, bound together by a quiet, unbreakable promise to protect one another. Think of the young sailor's letter, traveling in a canvas bag across the ocean, carrying the innocent words of a morning that already belonged to the past. Think of the mother, sitting by her son's bed that night, watching him sleep in the dim light, softly brushing the hair from his forehead, her heart filled with a terrifying, beautiful love. The Axis powers believed that fear was the ultimate weapon. They believed that a sudden, shocking blow would fracture the foundation of the world. But they did not understand that when the foundation cracks, the roots of the trees only grip the earth tighter. The falling leaves of that Sunday did not mark the end of the tree, they marked the beginning of a long, cold winter, yes, but a winter that the roots would survive. Let the quiet of the evening settle around you now. The world outside your window may be vast and complex, but inside, you are safe. The storms of the past have blown through, leaving behind the quiet, gentle wisdom of endurance. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the comforting weight of your blankets. Let go of the worries of your own day. They are small, and they can wait. The night is here to offer you rest, just as it offered rest to those tired, brave souls so many years ago. Close your eyes. Listen to the gentle, rhythmic beating of your own heart, a small, quiet echo of the great, enduring spirit of humanity. Drift now, softly and slowly, into the peaceful dark. Good night. Out in the deep, freezing expanse of the Northern Ocean, the night does not just fall, it swallows the world whole. Imagine a darkness so complete, so heavy, that it feels like a thick woolen blanket draped softly over your eyes. There is no moon tonight. There are no stars. There is only the vast, breathing chest of the Atlantic Ocean, rising and falling in a slow, eternal rhythm. The water is a freezing, obsidian glass, and upon it rides a quiet, desperate lifeline. If you were to stand on the deck of one of these merchant ships, the cold would greet you like a familiar, if unwelcome, friend. It is a damp, biting cold that smells deeply of salt, wet iron, and the faint, sweet scent of diesel fuel. You would feel the immense, steel floor beneath your boots slowly rise, lifting you up toward the unseen sky, hovering for a gentle second at the crest of a swell, and then slowly, softly dipping down into the trough. Rise and fall. Inhale and exhale. The ship breathes with the sea. Look around you in the pitch black. You cannot see them, but you are not alone. Stretching out for miles in every direction is a ghost fleet. Dozens of massive, heavy ships, entirely blacked out. Not a single bulb is permitted to shine. Even the glow of a warm pipe or the strike of a match is forbidden, for in this dark sea, a single flicker of light can invite shadows from the deep. They sail shoulder to shoulder in the blind night, connected only by the faint, muffled thumping of their engines and the shared, quiet courage of the men keeping watch. The men who sail these ships are not the polished soldiers of propaganda posters. They do not wear crisp uniforms adorned with brass buttons or shining medals. They are grandfathers who have spent their entire lives reading the tides. They are young boys who, just a year ago, were apprenticing in a bakery or sweeping the floors of a local grocer. They wear heavy, knitted wool sweaters, thick canvas trousers, and woolen caps pulled low over their freezing ears. On the bridge of the ship, an older man stands at the wheel. His hands, rough and calloused from decades of handling salt-crusted ropes, hold the wooden spokes with a gentle, steady reverence. He stares out into the impenetrable black, his eyes aching from the strain of looking for shapes in the void. His private fear is a quiet, heavy stone sitting in his chest, but he does not let it show. He simply adjusts his grip, checks the faint, glowing dial of the compass hidden beneath a thick canvas hood, and holds the line. He knows that the lives of everyone back on the island depend on his steady hands. Down below the waterline, hidden away from the freezing wind, the atmosphere is different. The air is thick, warm, and hums with the vibrating heartbeat of the ship's massive engines. In a small, cramped cabin, off-duty sailors lie in narrow bunks. The room sways gently side to side, a cradle suspended over an abyss. A young cook sits at a small, bolted-down table, the weak light of a heavily shaded bulb casting long, soft shadows across his face. He is not sleeping. He is carefully, painstakingly carving a small block of wood with a pocket knife. He is making a little toy boat. With every gentle scrape of the blade, a tiny curl of pale wood falls to the table. He is thinking of his nephew back in a small coastal town, a boy who loves to watch the gulls circle the harbor. The cook imagines the warm, bright morning when he will finally walk up the gravel path to his sister's house and place the little wooden boat in the boy's hands. This simple, tender thought is his shield against the crushing weight of the ocean outside the steel hull. The Axis powers looked at the map of the world and saw the ocean as a weapon. They believed that if they could sever the invisible threads connecting the continents, the island nation holding out against them would simply starve in the dark. They sent long, silent shapes to glide beneath the waves, wolves made of steel, hunting in the deep, freezing water. They were calculating, efficient, and deeply hidden. The strategy was built on the cold arithmetic of isolation. If you take away a people's wheat, their oil, their medicine, and their letters from home, they will eventually lose the will to stand. But the machine of war, focused only on tonnage and torpedoes, failed to measure the profound resilience of the merchant mariner. It did not understand the quiet heroism of men who knowingly sailed into waters teeming with danger, armed with nothing but a compass, a cargo hold full of grain, and a stubborn refusal to let the light go out across the world. These sailors carried the very lifeblood of the free world in their rusted, groaning hulls. They brought flour so the baker in the mist could make his bread. They brought aviation fuel so the exhausted boys in the sky could return to the clouds. They brought canvas bags overflowing with letters, millions of folded pieces of paper carrying love, longing, and the simple, everyday prayers of mothers, fathers, and sweethearts. The fear of what lurked beneath the dark water was always there, a silent passenger on every voyage. But instead of breaking them, it forged a quiet, unbreakable brotherhood. When a sailor brought a steaming mug of black tea to the freezing man standing watch, their hands would brush against the warm tin cup, and a silent understanding would pass between them. We are here. We are together. We will see the dawn. There is a profound beauty in these quiet, unrecorded moments of sacrifice. So much of the history that turned the tide of the world did not happen in the bright, loud flash of a battlefield. It happened in the shadows. It happened in the lonely, freezing dark, carried out by people whose names never made it into the bold headlines of the newspapers. This hidden war, fought with quiet endurance, secret maneuvers, and invisible courage, is utterly fascinating when you peel back the layers of time. If you find yourself drawn to these forgotten corners of the past, to the whispered secrets and the unsung heroes who shaped the world from the shadows, I would love to share something special with you. I have put together a warm, welcoming email newsletter, and when you join, I will send you a completely free ebook called The Shadow War: 5 Top Secret Operations That Shaped World War II. Each week, we will go on a quiet, deep dive journey together, exploring the espionage, the hidden facts, and the deeply human stories of those who operated unseen. Please, To keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the long, agonizing hours of the night watch slowly turn, the absolute blackness of the sky begins to soften. It does not happen all at once. It is a slow, hesitant thinning of the dark. The horizon line, previously invisible, begins to separate the sky from the sea with a faint, bruised ribbon of deep violet. The men on the bridge feel a collective, silent exhalation. The grip on the wooden will relaxes just a fraction. The old man's eyes, red and burning from the wind and salt, watches the violet slowly bleeds into a pale, ash gray. As the light softly touches the water, the ghost fleet begins to reveal itself. One by one, the massive silhouettes of the merchant ships emerge from the mist. The old man counts them. He scans the horizon, his breath forming small white clouds in the freezing air, looking for the familiar shapes of the ships that sailed beside him in the blind night. When he reaches the final number, a profound, heavy warmth spreads through his chest. They are all still here. They have survived another night. The ocean, which had seemed like a terrifying, infinite void just hours before, now looks like a pathway of hammered silver under the weak morning sun. The waves are still high, the wind is still bitter, but the darkness has been conquered. The U-boats, creatures of the shadows, retreat from the light, their hunt thwarted for another day by the steady, plodding endurance of the convoy. The arrogance of the blockade was believing that isolation would breed despair. The Axis leaders believed that by surrounding the island with a dark, freezing moat, they could force a quiet surrender. But they did not realize that the ocean is not a wall, it is a road. And the people who traveled that road were not easily frightened by the dark. They possessed a quiet, steady lanterns in their hearts, a stubborn hope that could not be extinguished by torpedoes or freezing rain. Think of the young cook, finally finished his shift. He wipes his flour-dusted hands on his apron, slips the little wooden boat into his pocket, and climbs into his narrow bunk. He pulls the heavy wool blanket up to his chin. The ship is still swaying, a gentle, rhythmic rocking that now feels less like a precarious tightrope and more like a massive, protective cradle. He closes his eyes, listening to the muffled thrum of the engine, the steady heartbeat of a machine guided by brave men, carrying life across the water. The sea is a vast and ancient thing, but it was no match for the simple, profound desire of ordinary people to keep their world connected. The supplies kept coming. The letters kept arriving. The light on the island never went out, because the men in the dark refused to let it. Now, it is your time to rest. The long, cold night of the past is over, and you are safe in the warm harbor of the present. Let the deep, slow rhythm of the ocean enter your breathing. Imagine the gentle rise and fall of the ship on a calm, moonlit sea. You are entirely secure. The dark water holds no fears, only a deep, profound peace. Allow your mind to drift on the gentle waves. Let your thoughts become as light as sea foam, floating away into the soft, gray mist of sleep. The lanterns have brought us safely through the dark. Rest now. Breathe slowly, and let the quiet, peaceful sea carry you away. The ocean holds its breath just before the dawn, a vast, unbroken mirror of sleeping water waiting for the sky to wake. If you were to drift above the great Pacific on this particular morning, you would see a world that looks entirely at peace. The water is a deep, impossible blue, stretching out so far that it curves with the very shape of the earth. There are no borders here. There are no walls, no ruined cities, no muddy trenches. There is only the gentle, rhythmic rising and falling of the deep, a liquid heartbeat that has pulsed long before us, and will pulse long after we are gone. As the sun begins to peek over the edge of the world, it paints the tips of the waves in soft, shimmering shades of peach and gold. It is a morning of profound, quiet beauty. But beneath this beautiful, sunlit surface, the currents of history are pulling tight. Let us step away from the blinding light of the ocean for a moment, and travel to a place where the sun does not reach. Hidden away in the damp, windowless basement of a building thousands of miles from the front line, the air is stale and heavy. The room hums with the low, constant drone of electric fans trying to push away the tropical heat. Here, there are no guns. There are no armored tanks. There is only the quiet, rhythmic clatter of typewriters, the scratching of pencils, and the deep, exhausted sighs of men who have forgotten what the sun looks like. Imagine a man sitting at a crowded wooden desk. His collar is unbuttoned, his tie pulled loose. His eyes are red-rimmed, shadowed by deep, violet circles of fatigue. He holds a piece of paper covered in a chaotic jumble of letters and numbers. To anyone else, it is absolute nonsense. But to him, it is a locked door in a dark room, and he is gently, desperately trying to find the key. He takes a sip of coffee that went cold hours ago. He rubs his aching eyes. And then, in the quiet hum of the basement, the tumblers in his mind finally click into place. The gibberish on the page slowly transforms into a whisper from the enemy. It is a secret, a profound and terrible secret about a small, lonely atoll in the middle of the vast ocean. He does not shout. He does not cheer. He simply leans back in his hard wooden chair, lets out a long, trembling breath, and hands the paper to his friend. In this quiet, dusty room, armed with nothing but patience and a pencil, they have just reached out and caught the swinging pendulum of the world. Far out on the sunlit waves, a great armada is moving. The Axis fleet glides across the water with a terrifying, beautiful grace. They are the undisputed masters of the ocean. They carry with them the supreme confidence of an empire that has never known the bitter taste of a true defeat. The admirals stand on their immaculate teak decks, looking out over the endless blue horizon, believing entirely in their own invincibility. They believe they are moving in absolute secrecy. They are a great, dark shadow passing over the bright water, entirely unaware that their shadow has already been seen. This was the quiet arrogance that began to unravel their empire. They believed so deeply in the perfection of their machine that they could not imagine the quiet, stubborn brilliance of exhausted men in a basement halfway across the world. On the other side of that same ocean, resting on the flight deck of an American aircraft carrier, the morning air smells strongly of salt, hot canvas, and the sharp tang of aviation fuel. The sun is fully up now, beating down on the steel deck, radiating a heavy, shimmering heat. A young pilot is sitting in the narrow, cramped cockpit of his airplane. The canvas canopy is slid back to let in the breeze. He is wearing a heavy leather helmet, his goggles pushed up onto his forehead. He looks terribly young. His hands, resting lightly on the control stick, are trembling just a little. He reaches into the zippered pocket of his flight suit and pulls out a small, frayed photograph. It is a picture of a young woman standing on a wooden porch, laughing, the wind catching the hem of her summer dress. He traces the edge of her face with his thumb. He closes his eyes and tries to block out the roaring of the engines warming up around him. He tries to remember the exact sound of her laugh, the way the sunlight caught in her hair on the day that picture was taken. He knows what is waiting for him out there in the vast, empty blue. He knows that he is a very small, very fragile thing, about to be thrown into a storm of fire and steel. He is terrified. But as he looks at the photograph, his fear is met by a quiet, fierce wave of love. He carefully tucks the picture back into his pocket, close to his chest. He pulls down his goggles. He is ready. History is a heavy thing, but it does not turn on grand, sweeping gestures. It turns on a razor's edge. It turns on the span of 5 quiet minutes. When we look back at these fragile turning points, it can be difficult to truly grasp how precariously the world teetered on the edge of darkness. It was not inevitable that the light would win. It took human hands, human fears, and human sacrifices to push the shadows back. Sometimes, holding a tangible piece of that history, or watching it beautifully and respectfully brought to life on a screen, helps us truly feel the weight of those moments. It connects us to the boys in the cockpits and the men in the basement. If you feel drawn to honor these pivotal moments and want to explore the visual history of the war, I highly recommend finding a quiet evening to watch a film like Midway on Prime Video, or perhaps seeking out authentic World War II memorabilia on Amazon. Having a physical reminder of the past, or immersing yourself in a beautifully crafted historical film, is a wonderful way to keep these memories alive in your own home. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. High above the ocean, the clouds are thick, white, and piled high like castles of snow in the sky. The young pilot is flying through a world of absolute, blinding white. He is lost. The fuel gauge on his dashboard is slowly, inevitably dropping toward empty. The vast ocean below is hidden. He is entirely alone in the mist. His commander, flying ahead, has to make a choice. A quiet, terrifying guess in the dark. He banks his plane, following a single, faint ripple on the water far below, trusting his instincts over the empty map. And then, suddenly, the clouds break. The white mist parts like a curtain, and the sun pours down onto the ocean below. And there, basking in the sunlight, completely unaware of the eyes in the sky, is the heart of the Axis fleet. The moments that follow are not filled with glorious music. They are filled with the terrifying roar of engines diving toward the sea. The young pilot pushes his stick forward. The wind screams past his canvas canopy. The world becomes a blur of blue water, white ship wakes, and the sudden, heartbreaking flashes of light. In the span of just a few minutes, the invincible armada is broken. The supreme confidence of the Empire shatters like glass on the sunlit waves. The giant, steel vessels, thought to be unsinkable, are mortally wounded, slipping slowly, quietly down into the freezing, dark embrace of the deep. The battle ends as suddenly as it began. The sky empties. The smoke slowly drifts away on the ocean breeze, dissipating into the vast blue until it is nothing more than a memory. The ocean, ancient and indifferent, simply swallows the ripples and returns to its eternal, gentle breathing. When the young pilot returns to his ship, the sun is beginning to set, casting long, peaceful shadows across the flight deck. He climbs out of his cockpit, his legs shaking so badly he can barely stand. His face is pale, smeared with grease and sweat. He does not speak. He simply walks across the deck, goes down into the quiet, dim belly of the ship, and sits on his narrow bunk. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out the photograph again. The edges are a little more frayed. His thumb leaves a faint smudge of dark oil on the white border. He stares at the girl laughing on the porch, and he begins to softly, quietly weep. He weeps for the boys who will not be coming back to the ship tonight. He weeps for the terrifying fragility of his own life. And he weeps because he knows, with a profound, exhausted certainty, that the tide has finally turned. The great Axis machine had overreached. They had confused their own arrogance for destiny. They believed that because they were loud, because they were vast, they could not be broken. But they were broken by a man in a basement holding a pencil. They were broken by a boy in a canvas airplane holding a photograph. They were broken by the quiet, enduring spirit of people who simply refused to surrender the light. As the night falls over the Pacific, the stars begin to emerge, reflecting like tiny, silver diamonds on the calm water. The world is safe for another day. Let that profound peace settle over you now. Think of the quiet, gentle ocean, breathing slowly in the dark. The storms of history have passed. The shadows have retreated. You are in a safe, warm place. Let your own breathing match the slow, steady rhythm of the waves. Inhale the calm. Exhale the worries of your day. Let them drift away on the tide, floating further and further into the distance until they are completely gone. Close your eyes. The water is perfectly still. The sky is vast and protective. Drift now, lightly and softly, on the sunlit waves of your own peaceful dreams. Rest well. The night is yours, and you are entirely safe. Even a river as mighty as the Volga eventually surrenders to the quiet, heavy sleep of winter. Imagine standing on the steep, broken banks of that great waterway, just as the deepest cold begins to settle over the earth. At first, the freezing happens in secret. Small, delicate crystals of ice form along the quiet edges, clinging to the frozen reeds and the forgotten stones. Then, slowly, the ice reaches outward, a pale, creeping skin that stretches across the dark, moving water. The river grows sluggish. It thickens. And then, one deeply hushed night, the motion simply stops. The vast, rushing artery of the continent becomes a solid, silent road of white. The city that rests beside this river was once a place of noise, of industry, of families walking through sunlit parks. But now, it has been transformed into a strange, fractured landscape of iron and stone, softened only by the endless, falling snow. The snow here does not fall in a sudden storm. It drifts down in a perpetual, hypnotic rhythm. It is a gentle, erasing force. It covers the jagged edges of broken buildings, turning them into pale, sleeping mountains. It blankets the abandoned streets, burying the debris of a halted empire beneath a pure, heavy shroud. In the cavernous basement of what used to be a grand department store, the air is unimaginably cold. It is a cold that does not merely touch the skin, it sinks into the bone, settling there like a heavy, leaden weight. In this dim, shadowed space, a young soldier sits with his back pressed against a damp concrete wall. He is swathed in layers of whatever he could find, a torn woolen blanket, a scrap of canvas, a scarf that once belonged to someone else. He holds a small, leather-bound diary in his numb, trembling hands. The pencil he uses is barely a stub. He breathes on his fingers, a small, white plume of mist in the dark, trying to summon just enough feeling to form the letters. He does not write about grand strategies or the speeches of distant leaders. He writes about the quiet, devastating ache in his stomach. He writes about the dream he had the night before, a vivid, heartbreaking dream of sitting by the tiled stove in his childhood home, watching his mother slice a fresh, warm loaf of bread. He writes, "The snow is falling again today. It is so quiet." We listen to the radio, but the voices from home sound like they are coming from another planet. They tell us to hold on, to be brave, but they do not know what the frost feels like. They do not know that the metal of our machines is frozen solid. I just want to be warm again. He closes the little book and tucks it deep inside his coat, close to his chest, hoping his fading body heat will protect the fragile pages. This is the quiet reality of the grand invasion's end. The immense, unstoppable machine of the Axis powers did not grind to a halt in a blaze of theatrical glory. It simply froze. The conquerors, who had marched across the map with such terrifying, mathematical precision, found themselves swallowed by the vast, unfeeling patience of the winter, and by a city that simply refused to die. Across the frozen expanse of a shattered square, deep beneath the rubble of a fallen apartment block, the true heartbeat of the city endures. Here, the defenders have dug into the very earth of their home. It is dark, lit only by the weak, flickering glow of a homemade oil wick. The air smells of earth, of damp wool, and of quiet, unbroken resolve. A young woman, no older than 20, sits in the dirt. She wears a thick, padded jacket, her face smudged with soot and exhaustion. Beside her is an older man, a grandfather who refused to leave his street when the tanks arrived. They share a single, dented tin cup of hot water. There are no tea leaves left, but the warmth of the water is a profound, miraculous comfort. She passes the cup to him with a gentle, trembling hand. He nods, taking a slow sip, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a quiet expression of gratitude. They do not speak of victory. They only speak of tomorrow. They speak of the day the snow will melt. They are rooted in this frozen soil in a way the young boys shivering in the department store are not. The invaders are strangers, adrift in an ocean of ice, longing for a home thousands of miles away. But the defenders are already home. Even in the ruins, even in the dark, they are held by the land. This was the unseen wall the empire crashed against. You can conquer a map, but you cannot conquer the deep, quiet love a person holds for the ground beneath their feet. The contrast between the polished, boasting broadcasts of the Axis leaders and the bleak, frozen reality of the soldiers on the ground is one of the most profound tragedies of this era. History, as it is often presented to us today, tends to smooth over the rough, agonizing truth of these moments. We see neat lines in textbooks. We do not see the numb hands holding the diary or the hollow eyes of boys abandoned by their commanders. To truly grasp the magnitude of what happened here, to honor the sheer human endurance required to survive the white shroud of the Volga, we must be willing to look at the unfiltered past. Because many platforms restrict or hide the stark, harsh realities of war, I have curated a sensitive, deeply respectful digital collection of unseen, raw images and videos from these frozen front lines, available over on Gumroad. It is a sobering window into the uncensored truth of history, showing the real human faces beneath the snow. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the weeks drag on, the silence over the city deepens. It is a heavy, absolute silence, broken only by the mournful howling of the wind sweeping off the steppes. The wind carries no comfort. It merely rearranges the snow, drifting it higher against the ruined walls, burying the broken tanks until they look like nothing more than strange, sleeping hills of white. The young soldier in the basement no longer writes in his diary. He is too tired. He leans his head back against the concrete and watches his breath materialize in the dim light. He thinks of the summer, so long ago, when they first marched eastward under a warm sun, singing songs of inevitable triumph. It feels like a lifetime away. It feels like a story that happened to someone else. He realizes, with a slow, quiet sinking in his chest, that the grand promises were nothing but dust. The men in the warm offices who sent him here will not come to save him. The Empire's pride has become his icy prison. He reaches out and rests his hand on the shoulder of the boy sleeping next to him. A small, gentle touch in the endless dark. It is all he has left to give. It is a quiet admission that the uniforms, the flags, and the loud proclamations mean absolutely nothing when the fire goes out. All that is left is the fragile, trembling bond between two human beings trapped in the cold. When the end finally comes to the ruined city, it is not marked by a grand, sweeping cinematic climax. It comes with a soft, exhausted exhale. It comes when the frozen hands simply can no longer hold the weight of their weapons. The rifles are dropped into the deep snow, making no sound as they fall. The men walk out of their cellars, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes squinting against the blinding glare of the white sky. They walk slowly, shuffling across the frozen river, leaving a long, winding trail of footprints in the powder. Behind them, the city remains, completely still. It has absorbed the heaviest blow the world could deliver, and though it is broken, it still stands. The white shroud covers the scars, bringing a quiet, solemn peace to the banks of the Volga. The hubris of the Axis was finally, irrevocably frozen. They had believed they could dictate terms to the earth, to the winter, and to the human spirit. But as the long lines of defeated, shivering men disappeared into the misty horizon, the silence of the snow spoke the only truth that mattered. The world cannot be forced into submission by steel alone. The machine will always eventually break against the quiet, unyielding endurance of the human heart. As you lie comfortably now, let the image of that deep, silent snow settle into your mind. Feel the absolute stillness of the frozen river. But unlike those boys so long ago, you are not out in the cold. You are safe. You are surrounded by warmth. Pull your blankets a little closer. Feel the soft, gentle heat of your own space. The wind may howl outside, and the world may be vast and complex, but in this moment, you are sheltered. The quiet of the night is not a frozen void, it is a soft, welcoming blanket, inviting you to rest. Take a long, slow breath in. Let the cool air fill your lungs. Now, release it, a long, slow breath out, letting go of all the tension, all the worries of the day. Let them drift away like snowflakes melting on a warm hearth. Close your eyes. The history is written. The past is safely asleep. And now, it is time for you to sleep, too. Drift softly into the quiet, peaceful dark. Good night. There is a silence in the deep desert that is so profound, it feels as though the earth itself has stopped breathing. Imagine a landscape painted entirely in shades of gold, amber, and bleached bone. It is an ocean without water, a vast, rolling expanse of dunes that shift and change with the whispering wind. At midday, the sun does not just shine, it strikes the earth like a physical weight, turning the air into a shimmering, watery illusion. The horizon dances and ripples, playing tricks on the eyes. It is a place of breathtaking, terrifying beauty, entirely indifferent to the tiny, fragile lives of the men who have come to cross it. Into this ancient, quiet emptiness came the great, roaring machines of the Axis Empire. They arrived with the same supreme confidence that had carried them across the green fields of Europe. They painted their heavy tanks the color of the sand, believing they could seamlessly blend with the environment, that they could master this harsh world just as easily as they had mastered the soft, tempered plains of home. Their maps were drawn with bold, sweeping arrows, promising a swift, decisive march across the continent. But the desert does not read maps. And the desert does not bow to steel. Let us look closely at a young mechanic sitting in the narrow sliver of shade cast by the broken treads of his armored vehicle. He is thousands of miles from the cool, shaded pine forests of his youth. His uniform, once crisp and sharp, is completely stiff with sweat and dust. His face is hidden behind a thick layer of fine, powdery sand that clings to his eyelashes and settles deep into the lines around his eyes. He looks twice his actual age. He holds a small, dented tin cup in his hands. Inside is his daily ration of water. It is uncomfortably warm, and it tastes strongly of iodine and the metal jerrycan it was carried in. But to him, it is the most precious substance in the universe. He does not drink it right away. He just holds it, staring at the few precious drops, letting the anticipation soothe his cracked lips. When he finally takes a sip, he closes his eyes. For just a fraction of a second, the taste of the warm metal fades, and he imagines he is kneeling by the clear, icy stream behind his family's home, the water rushing over smooth stones, the air smelling of damp earth and moss. The memory is a phantom, a mirage of the mind, but it is the only thing keeping his spirit tethered to the world. He sets the cup down and picks up a small wrench. He must clean the sand from the engine again. The sand is the true enemy here. It is finer than flour. It sneaks through every seal, it grinds down the heavy steel gears, it chokes the carburetors, and it clogs the rifles. The grand, invincible machine of the Axis is being eaten alive by a billion tiny grains of earth. This was the quiet, agonizing reality of their campaign. They pushed forward, chasing a victory that always seemed to hover just out of reach, shimmering in the heat waves like a pool of cool water that vanishes as soon as you draw near. Their leaders demanded more speed, more ground, more conquest. But with every mile they advanced across the shifting sands, their supply lines stretched thinner and thinner, until they were nothing more than a fragile thread pulled taut across an endless wasteland. They were starving in the sun. Across that shimmering expanse, the defenders were waiting. They, too, were exhausted. They, too, were covered in the exact same dust, their lips just as cracked, their eyes just as weary. In a shallow trench dug into the hard pan, a young soldier from a rainy, damp island is trying to perform a miracle. He has cut an empty gasoline tin in half, filled it with sand, and soaked it in a few precious drops of fuel. He strikes a match, and a small, invisible flame springs to life in the bright daylight. He places a small pot of water over the heat. He is making tea. It is a remarkably small, seemingly insignificant act. But in the middle of a war, in the center of an alien, hostile desert, boiling a cup of tea is a profound act of defiance. It is a refusal to let the harshness of the world strip away the gentle, civilized routines of home. The water comes to a bubbling boil, and he carefully drops in a pinch of dark tea leaves. The familiar, earthy aroma rises into the dry air, instantly wrapping him in a cocoon of memory. He pours the tea into 2 tin mugs and carefully carries one to the older soldier sitting a few feet away, a man who has been staring blankly at the horizon for hours. The younger boy does not say a word. He just nudges his friend's shoulder and offers the steaming mug. The older man blinks, slowly returning from whatever distant place his mind had wandered to. He takes the cup, his hands trembling slightly, and breathes in the steam. A slow, deeply tired smile touches his face. It is a microscopic moment of grace, a quiet sharing of warmth and humanity that pushes back against the overwhelming, isolating vastness of the desert. The Axis forces believed that endurance was a matter of discipline and rigid obedience. They believed that if you order a man to march into the fire, he will march until he falls. But true endurance, the kind that survives the shifting sands and the burning sun, is not built on fear or commands. It is built on these tiny, shared moments. It is built on a cup of tea offered in silence. It is built on the profound, quiet understanding that you are not entirely alone. Finding these small, tender moments in the vast, sweeping history of the war is very much like wandering through that same endless desert. The grand battles, the loud declarations, and the sweeping movements of armies are like the massive dunes, easy to see, dominating the landscape. But the human stories, the quiet letters, the whispered fears, and the shared cups of water are like tiny, fragile flowers blooming in the dust. They are easily overlooked, buried beneath the weight of time, and it takes a long, solitary, and exhausting effort to gently brush away the sand and bring them into the light. I spend countless quiet hours sifting through fading archives, translating old journals, and piecing together these forgotten fragments so that the voices of these everyday heroes are not lost to the wind. If you find peace and value in these gentle stories, and if you would like to help me continue this long, careful work, I would be so incredibly grateful for your support over on Ko-Fi. Even a small tip, as low as $1, provides the warmth and encouragement needed to keep digging through the sands of history. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. When the sun finally begins to set over the desert, the transformation is sudden and absolute. The sky bleeds from a blinding, harsh white into spectacular shades of deep violet, bruised orange, and soft, dusty rose. And then, the heat simply vanishes. The warmth of the day is pulled up into the atmosphere, leaving behind a profound, biting cold that sweeps across the dunes like a physical wave. The young Axis mechanic shivers. He wraps a thin, wool blanket around his shoulders and leans back against the cooling metal of his tank. Above him, the sky opens up into a canopy of stars so vast, so incredibly bright, that it takes his breath away. Away from the lights of the cities, the Milky Way looks like a thick, glowing river of diamonds spilled across the black velvet of the night. He looks up, and for a moment, the war completely disappears. He feels incredibly, wonderfully small. The commanders in their tents were agonizing over maps, trying to conquer a landscape that had watched empires rise and fall for thousands of years. They were drawing lines in the sand, entirely blind to the fact that the next wind would simply blow those lines away. The arrogance of the Axis was believing they could impose their rigid, mechanical order onto a world that is inherently wild, ancient, and untamable. But the young boy wrapped in the blanket under the stars understands what his leaders do not. He knows that the grand machine is broken. He knows that the distance has defeated them. They chased a mirage of total victory across an endless wasteland, and in the end, all they found was exhaustion, empty engines, and the quiet, indifferent majesty of the deep desert. The tide of the war turned here not in a sudden, dramatic clash, but in a slow, agonizing grinding to a halt. The conquerors simply ran out of breath. They were swallowed by the sheer scale of the earth, outlasted by men who found strength not in grand ideologies, but in the simple, stubborn desire to eventually go home and drink tea in the rain. As you lie there now, let the vast, quiet stillness of the desert night settle over your own mind. Imagine that beautiful, sprawling canopy of stars stretching out above you, a glowing, protective dome keeping you safe. The heat of the day is gone. The struggles of the sunlit hours have vanished, leaving behind only the cool, peaceful air of the night. You do not need to march any further today. You do not need to carry any burdens. Let your breathing become slow, deep, and rhythmic, like the gentle, unseen wind moving softly over the cooling dunes. Feel the comfortable weight of your blankets keeping you warm and secure. The mirages have faded, the world is at rest, and the quiet has come to carry you away. Close your eyes. Drift softly into the starlight, and let the peaceful, endless night embrace you. Good night. Long before the armies came, the ancient olive trees had already learned how to weep in the rain. Imagine a hillside draped in a thick, silver mist, rising up from a dark and quiet valley. It is autumn, and the romantic, sun-drenched postcards of this beautiful peninsula have been completely washed away by a relentless, chilling downpour. The rain does not fall in angry sheets. Instead, it is a constant, soft drizzle that seems to blur the edges of the world. It coats the silvery green leaves of the olive groves, gathering at the tips before falling, drop by drop, onto the ancient, softening earth below. This land is old. It is terraced with low stone walls that were built by calloused hands hundreds, perhaps thousands, of years ago. It is a landscape designed for growing vines, for herding sheep, for quiet, slow generations of peace. But now, the heavy boots of the world are slipping in its mud. When we think of the great conflict, we often picture the sweeping, fast-moving lines across flat plains, or the dramatic clashes on vast oceans. But here, the war was reduced to a painfully slow, agonizing crawl. It was fought not in miles, but in yards. From one crumbling stone wall to the next. From one muddy, rain-soaked hill to another hill that looked exactly like it. In the shadow of a small, ruined stone barn, a young soldier from a very young country sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest. He is from a place of wide open spaces, of golden wheat and endless, flat horizons. Now, he is trapped in a vertical world of mud and gray rock. His uniform is entirely soaked through, the heavy wool clinging to him like a second, freezing skin. He holds a damp piece of paper in his lap, shielding it from the drizzle with the brim of his helmet. He is writing a letter to his wife. He doesn't write about the strategic importance of the valley, or the grand speeches of the generals safe in their distant palaces. He writes about the mud. He tells her how it pulls at his boots, how it seems to have a life of its own, swallowing the wheels of their carts and the hooves of the poor, tired mules they use to carry their supplies up the steep, winding trails. But then, his pencil pauses. He looks up, out through the missing roof of the barn. He writes, "Despite everything, my love, this place is beautiful in a heartbreaking way. Today, the smell of crushed rosemary was so strong under our boots. I found a small statue of an angel in the dirt, her wing broken, but her face so peaceful. I put her in my pocket for luck. I miss your face. I miss the dry warmth of our kitchen." He folds the damp paper and tucks it away. He closes his eyes and listens to the rhythmic, soothing sound of the rain tapping against the leaves. He is so incredibly tired. But he knows that tomorrow, he will stand up, he will shoulder his heavy pack, and he will walk a few more yards up the mountain. This was the unseen friction that ground down the Axis machine. The conquerors had drawn a line across the map of this beautiful, mountainous boot, declaring that not an inch would be surrendered. They commanded their men to hold every peak, every river crossing, every ancient village. But an empire cannot be sustained by sheer, rigid stubbornness alone. Further up the mountain, hidden among the twisting, gnarled trunks of the oldest olive trees, a young man in a gray coat sits in the deepening twilight. He is an invader, but in this moment, he looks only like a profoundly lost boy. He leans his head against the rough, wet bark of the tree. The bark is grooved and twisted, shaped by centuries of wind and sun. He feels the deep, silent age of the wood beneath his fingertips, and a profound sense of futility washes over him. He realizes, with a quiet, sinking clarity, that he does not belong here. His leaders told him he was part of an invincible force, destined to rule the world. But here, shivering in the Italian rain, he feels entirely powerless. The land itself is resisting them. The mountains are too steep, the rivers are too swollen, and the slow, relentless pressure from the men climbing up from the south is never-ending. They are bleeding out slowly, drop by drop, just like the rain falling from the silver leaves. He pulls a small, silver pocket watch from his coat. The glass is cracked, but the delicate hand still ticks softly in the quiet air. It belonged to his grandfather. He watches the second hand sweep in its endless circle, and he wonders how many more hours, how many more hills, they can possibly endure before the machine finally, completely breaks. Caught between these two weary forces are the people to whom these hills actually belong. In a village perched precariously on the edge of a ravine, the war has blown the roofs from the churches and shattered the cobblestones. In the deep, vaulted cellar beneath a bakery, a family huddles together in the dark. An elderly woman, her head wrapped in a simple black shawl, holds her young grandson tightly in her arms. The child is crying softly, hungry and frightened by the low, distant thunder that never seems to stop. The grandmother rocks him gently, swaying back and forth in the damp dark. She sings a lullaby, a melody so old it seems to have been born from the stones themselves. It is a song about a little bird finding shelter in a storm. Her voice is frail, trembling like a dry leaf in the wind, but it is the bravest sound in the world. It is the sound of humanity refusing to be silenced by the dark. When the morning finally breaks, the rain pauses. A pale, weak sunlight filters through the clouds, touching the ruined village. The Allied soldiers carefully walk up the muddy path, their rifles lowered, their eyes scanning the rubble. The grandmother slowly emerges from the cellar, blinking against the light. She sees the boy from the flat, golden country. He is covered in mud, exhausted, and shivering. They do not speak the same language. They have nothing in common, except for the profound, shared tragedy of this moment. The old woman reaches deep into the pocket of her heavy wool skirt. She pulls out a small, wrinkled apple, perhaps the last piece of fresh food she has. She walks up to the tall, frightened boy in the muddy uniform, and presses it gently into his dirty hands. She pats his cheek with her soft, wrinkled hand, murmurs a quiet blessing, and turns away. The young soldier stands perfectly still, staring at the apple in his palm. Tears, warm and sudden, mix with the cold rain on his face. It is a microscopic moment of grace, a tiny spark of warmth in a freezing world. These are the moments that truly turn the tide. It was not just the slow, grinding destruction of the Axis armies, it was the quiet, undeniable proof that compassion, love, and simple human kindness are infinitely stronger than the cold geometry of conquest. The Axis leaders believed that suffering would break the spirit of the people, that it would make them cruel and compliant. But instead, the suffering only deepened their humanity, drawing them together in quiet, desperate acts of love. Understanding this slow, grueling journey up the mountains requires patience. It is much like the journey of truly understanding history itself. We cannot just look at the grand maps or read the bold headlines. We have to walk the long, slow path. We have to peel back the layers of time, digging into the mud and the memories, discovering the raw, unfiltered truth of what these ordinary people endured. For those of you who feel a deep calling to make that journey, to slow down and truly immerse yourself in the layered, emotional realities of the past, I would be deeply honored to walk that path with you. I have created a quiet, dedicated space over on Patreon, where a passionate community of history lovers gathers. There, we share free, full-length podcasts that dive deeply into these personal narratives, along with raw, unblurred historical footage that brings the reality of these moments to life. There is also a small tip jar for those who wish to support this ongoing work. It is a sanctuary for those who wish to remember, uncensored and unhurried. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As evening returns to the olive grove, the mist rolls back in, thick and cooling. The world becomes small and hushed once again. The tired soldiers, on both sides of the line, find whatever shelter they can. They wrap themselves in damp blankets, leaning against the ancient, enduring trunks of the trees. The trees do not judge them. They simply stand, their deep roots gripping the rocky soil, just as they have for centuries. They have seen storms before, and they know that eventually, all storms must pass. The Axis powers believed they could carve their names into eternity through force. But as the long, slow slog through the Italian mud proved, true endurance does not come from steel. It comes from the ability to bend without breaking. It comes from the boy writing a letter of love in the freezing rain. It comes from the grandmother offering her last apple to a stranger. It comes from the quiet, collective sigh of a people who simply refuse to let the darkness win. The machine of the conquerors was fracturing here, not in a sudden explosion, but in a slow, agonizing splintering. The mud trapped their ambitions. The mountains broke their momentum. And the quiet, unyielding humanity of the people they sought to subjugate proved to be a wall they could never truly climb. Let the image of that quiet olive grove settle into your mind now. The rain has finally stopped. The air is cool, clean, and smells of wet earth and crushed rosemary. The night is perfectly peaceful. You are safe. You are far away from the cold mud and the steep mountains. Your bed is soft, and your room is warm. Let your breathing slow down, matching the gentle, rhythmic dripping of the water from the silver leaves outside in your imagination. With every breath out, let go of the exhaustion of your own day. The struggles you faced are behind you. The long climb is over for tonight. Sink deeper into your pillows. Let your muscles soften and relax. There is nothing more you need to carry. The ancient trees are standing guard in the quiet dark, and they whisper that everything will be well. Close your eyes, let the soft mist of the evening wash over you, and drift away into a deep, comforting sleep. Good night. There is a profound, terrifying beauty in a sky that seems to carry too many stars. Imagine floating thousands of feet above the sleeping earth, swallowed entirely by a boundless, freezing night. Up here, the air is so thin it cannot hold warmth, and the darkness is absolute, save for the pale, icy glow of the moon reflecting off seas of clouds. The world below is hidden, a distant memory wrapped in shadows. If you were to close your eyes in this high, lonely place, you would not hear the wind. You would only hear a deep, relentless, thrumming vibration that settles into the very marrow of your bones. It is the sound of 1,000 heavy engines, beating together in the dark, a massive, mechanical heart suspended between heaven and earth. Inside the belly of one of these great, flying leviathans, it is not a place of glory or grand adventure. It is an icebox made of thin, rattling aluminum. The air smells sharply of ozone, hydraulic fluid, and the faint, comforting scent of hot coffee turning cold in a thermos. Sitting in a small, cramped compartment near the nose of the ship is a young boy. He is bundled in layers of heavy, sheepskin-lined leather, looking more like a clumsy bear than a warrior. He has pulled off his thick right glove, sacrificing the warmth so his bare fingers can delicately trace the thin, fragile lines on a paper map. His fingers are pale, blue at the tips from the biting frost that coats the inside of the small glass window beside him. He is a long way from the quiet, dusty roads of his hometown. He is supposed to be studying mathematics in a warm, brick library. Instead, he is sitting in the freezing dark, navigating by the faint light of the stars. In his breast pocket, tucked safely behind a heavy zipper, is a small, folded piece of paper. It is a letter from his father, offering simple advice about changing the oil in the family car, and ending with a quiet, pleading sentence asking him to just keep his head down. The boy places his hand over the pocket, feeling the crinkle of the paper through his thick suit. It is his anchor to the earth. He looks out the frost-rimmed window into the blackness, knowing that surrounding him are hundreds of other boys and hundreds of other machines, all feeling the exact same quiet, deeply buried fear. They are strangers, united only by the cold, the dark, and the heavy burden they have been asked to carry across the sky. Far below them, the world is wrapped in an enforced, nervous slumber. Cities that once glowed with the warm, inviting light of street lamps, theater marquees, and tavern windows are now plunged into a deep, artificial pitch black. The Axis leaders, in their towering hubris, had once promised their people that the sky belonged to them. They had promised that no shadow would ever fall upon their homes, that the storm they had unleashed upon the world would never reverse its course and cross their own thresholds. But hubris cannot build a roof over a city. In the cellar of a small, narrow brick house, the air is thick with the smell of damp earth, coal dust, and preserved apples. A grandmother sits on a wooden crate, her back pressed against the cold stone wall. Beside her, wrapped tightly in a thick woolen quilt, is her young granddaughter. The little girl is wide awake, her eyes dark and searching in the dim light of a single, shielded candle. They can hear it now. It starts not as a sound, but as a feeling. A faint, rhythmic trembling in the floorboards. The grandmother pulls the little girl closer, resting her chin on the top of the child's soft head. She begins to hum a gentle, low melody, trying to weave a blanket of sound to protect the girl from the noise outside. The grandmother remembers the days when her country's leaders stood on grand podiums, shouting into microphones, promising 1,000 years of unbroken triumph. She remembers the flags waving in the sunlit squares. But sitting here in the damp, vibrating dark, those loud, angry voices mean absolutely nothing. The grand illusion has shattered. The war is no longer a map on a wall or a broadcast on the radio. It is right above them, hidden in the night. She holds no hatred in her heart in this moment. There is no room for hatred when you are simply trying to survive the dark. She only feels a profound, heavy sorrow for a world that has lost its way, and a fierce, desperate love for the child trembling in her arms. This is how the great Axis machine truly began to fracture. It was not just the destruction of the steel mills, the train yards, or the factories that built the engines of war. It was the slow, agonizing destruction of the myth of their own invulnerability. You cannot sustain an empire on promises when the sky itself is falling. The workers who were meant to build the tanks were spending their nights huddled in cellars, exhausted, terrified, and slowly realizing that the protective walls their leaders had spoken of were nothing but air and arrogance. High above, the young navigator in his freezing glass bubble looks down. The darkness below is suddenly pierced by flashes of light. It looks as though the stars have lost their grip on the heavens and are tumbling down to the earth. It is a terrible, awe-inspiring sight, stripped of all humanity by the sheer, unimaginable distance between the sky and the ground. These men in the sky were phantoms. They operated in the absolute dark, miles above the earth, far removed from the visible front lines. They carried out missions that were meant to remain unseen until the morning light revealed the changed world below. So much of the turning point of this era was decided exactly like this, in the unseen, in the quiet dark, in the hidden spaces where secrets moved like ghosts. If you find yourself captivated by these unseen forces of history, by the brave individuals who operated in the shadows far from the public eye, I would love to invite you to join my quiet email newsletter. When you sign up, I will send you a completely free copy of my ebook, The Shadow War, 5 Top Secret Operations That Shaped World War II. It is a gentle, deep-dive exploration into the hidden heroes, the espionage, and the forgotten operations that quietly shifted the balance of the world while the rest of the world was looking elsewhere. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the long, exhausting hours of the night slowly bleed away, the great machines in the sky begin their wide, sweeping turns back toward the sea. The vibration of the engines changes pitch, settling into a lower, more comforting drone. The young navigator takes a slow, shaky breath. The frost on his window is beginning to catch the very first, pale hints of the approaching dawn. The darkness in the cockpit softens from a harsh black to a gentle, bruised purple. He slips his thick leather glove back onto his freezing, aching hand. He has survived the night. He closes his eyes and lets the rhythmic hum of the plane rock him, just for a moment, into a fragile, exhausted doze. Down below, the all-clear sirens finally wail. It is a single, steady note that stretches across the ruins, signaling the return of the morning. The grandmother and the little girl slowly climb the wooden stairs from the cellar. They push open the heavy door and step out into a world that is permanently altered. The air is thick with plaster dust and the smell of smoke. The street they have known their entire lives looks foreign, jagged, and broken. But as the grandmother looks down the street, she sees her neighbor, an old man in a gray sweater, sweeping the debris off his front steps with a broom. He looks up, sees her, and gives a slow, exhausted nod. There are no words exchanged. There is no need for them. It is a silent acknowledgement of their shared endurance. The Axis powers had believed they could outlast the rest of the world through sheer, unbending willpower. But as they looked up at their vulnerable skies, they realized that the willpower of ordinary people, people who simply want to protect their homes, their children, and their right to live in peace, is a force far more powerful than any marching army. The stars had fallen, and the illusion was broken. The night had been terrifying, but the sun was rising once again, casting long, gentle shadows over the broken stones. And now, as this chapter of the past gently closes, it is time for your own night to deepen. Look out your own window, in your mind's eye. The sky above you is clear, calm, and perfectly safe. The stars are exactly where they belong, twinkling softly in the vast, velvet quiet of the universe. They are not falling. They are simply keeping watch. Let the deep, rhythmic hum of the past fade away into silence. Feel the softness of your own bed, the comforting weight of your blankets wrapping around you like a protective embrace. The world below is quiet. The sky above is at peace. Take a deep, slow breath in, filling your lungs with the calm, cool night air. And as you exhale, let go of every lingering thought, every small worry from your day. Let them drift up into the night, floating away until they disappear entirely. You are safe here. You are held by the quiet of the night. Sleep now, softly and deeply. Good night. The water between the two shores was dark, deep, and heavy with a million unspoken secrets. If you were to stand on the chalky, white cliffs of the island and look out over the channel on a misty spring night, you would see nothing but a rolling sea of gray. The distance between the two lands is not very far. On a clear summer day, you can almost see the faint, smudged line of the opposite coast. But in this moment, suspended in the long, tense breath before the storm, that narrow strip of freezing water felt as wide as the universe itself. The world was waiting. It was a waiting that you could feel in the damp air, a quiet, vibrating tension that settled over the cobblestone streets, the quiet coastal villages, and the deep, silent forests. Let us wander away from the true, beating heart of the gathered forces, and walk through a misty, quiet field in the southeast. Here, beneath the cover of the night in the thick, rolling fog, a strange and quiet magic is taking place. A young man, wearing a raincoat glistening with dew, is kneeling in the wet grass. Before the world broke apart, he was a set designer for a small theater in a bustling city. He spent his days painting backdrops of rolling hills and majestic castles, creating illusions out of canvas and light. Now, his canvas is the muddy earth of his homeland, and his illusion is meant to save the world. He connects a heavy canvas hose to a small, muffled air compressor. With a gentle, rhythmic hum, a massive shape begins to rise from the field. It is a tank. It looks heavy, imposing, and perfectly real in the dim light. But it is made entirely of hollow rubber. It is a ghost. He pats the soft, yielding side of the rubber machine, a tired smile touching his lips. Around him, hundreds of other men are doing the same. They are quietly assembling a phantom army. They are setting up rows and rows of empty canvas tents. They are lighting campfires that no one will sit around, and driving trucks in endless, muddy circles to leave tracks for the enemy planes to find. The young artist sits on an overturned wooden crate, wiping the rain from his face. He pulls a thermos from his satchel and pours a cup of warm, sweet tea. He looks out over his field of fictions. He knows that across the dark water, the Axis commanders are staring at photographs of this very field. He knows they are counting these empty rubber shells, measuring the fake shadows, and believing exactly what they want to believe. This was the quiet, invisible weapon that the grand, arrogant empire could not comprehend. The Axis leaders, in their towering hubris, believed that power was always loud. They believed that strength was always made of iron and concrete. They could not imagine that the course of history could be entirely diverted by a group of quiet artists, architects, and tailors building a hollow lie in a rainy pasture. Their arrogance made them rigid, and in their rigidity, they became blind to the shadows. Let us cross that dark, heavy water now. We slip past the cold, gray waves, past the massive, jagged concrete walls that the empire has built to seal away the continent. We travel into a small, sleeping village nestled in the rolling green hills of the occupied coast. It is past midnight. The village is perfectly silent, wrapped in the enforced curfew of the conquerors. Every window is shuttered tight. Not a single sliver of light escapes into the narrow, cobblestone streets. But high up, in the dusty, cramped attic of a bakery, there is a tiny, fragile glow. A young woman sits on the floorboards, an old woolen blanket draped over her head and shoulders like a small, makeshift tent. Beneath the blanket, she huddles over a small, wooden radio receiver. She built it herself, piecing it together from stolen wire and scavenged parts. Her hands are shaking slightly, her breath shallow and quiet in the confined space. She turns the heavy plastic dial with agonizing slowness. Through the static, through the hiss and the crackle of the night air, she is searching for a voice. She is listening to the whispers across the channel. Suddenly, the static clears just enough. A calm, measured voice speaks from the little wooden box. It is reading a poem. A simple, melancholic verse about the autumn wind. To the guards patrolling the street below, the words would mean absolutely nothing. A strange, meaningless broadcast in the night. But to the young woman in the attic, those words are a key turning in a lock. She closes her eyes. A single tear traces a warm path down her cheek, cutting through the dust on her face. The message means the waiting is almost over. The long, dark winter of the occupation is finally nearing its end. She memorizes the phrase, her mind repeating the poem over and over like a sacred prayer. Tomorrow morning, she will go downstairs. She will bake the dark, heavy bread the village has learned to survive on. She will wrap a loaf in brown paper and hand it to the quiet old man who sweeps the church steps. And inside that paper, pressed gently into the crust of the bread, will be a tiny, folded slip of paper carrying the poem. This is the true, hidden fabric of resistance. It is not always found in loud, daring raids. More often, it is found in the quiet, terrifying courage of a girl sitting in a dusty attic, holding her breath, turning a radio dial. The Axis had built a wall of steel and concrete along the beaches, believing they could lock the door from the outside. But they did not know that the people inside the house were already quietly, systematically taking the hinges off the door. The objects that bound this vast, invisible network together were so small, so seemingly ordinary. A scavenged radio tube. A rubber valve on a fake tank. A coded message typed on a thin slip of onion skin paper. A worn compass held in the trembling hand of a young boy waiting in the woods. Holding a tangible piece of this history, or immersing yourself in the meticulous visual storytelling of this era, bridges the gap between our peaceful present and their incredibly tense reality. There is a profound connection that comes from seeing the physical artifacts of the preparation, or watching the quiet courage of those days brought to life on screen. For those who wish to honor this history and feel that connection, Amazon offers an incredible selection of authentic World War II memorabilia, as well as powerful, evocative films that capture the essence of these moments. Exploring these tangible pieces of the past is a wonderful way to keep the memory of these quiet heroes alive. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. Back across the channel, hidden beneath the thick canopy of a vast, ancient forest, the real army is waiting. It is a city made entirely of green canvas, hidden from the sky by the sprawling branches of oak and pine. Thousands upon thousands of young men are gathered here, breathing the damp, earthy air of the woods. The camp is unnaturally quiet. There is no loud music, no shouting, only the low, murmuring hum of men trying to pass the long hours. Sitting on the edge of his narrow canvas cot, a young soldier is carefully polishing his heavy leather boots. He dips a rag into a tin of dark polish, rubbing it into the leather in small, steady circles. It is a mindless, rhythmic task, and the repetition is soothing. It gives his hand something to do so his mind does not wander too far into the terrifying, unknown future. He sets the boots down and reaches for his writing pad. He uncaps his fountain pen. The ink is dark blue, the color of the deep ocean. He is writing a letter to his younger brother, who is still safely at home, worried only about his schoolwork and the neighbor's barking dog. The soldier does not tell his brother about the massive ships gathering in the harbors, or the incredible, heavy tension that hangs over the forest like a physical weight. He writes about the forest itself. He describes the way the moonlight filters through the pine needles, casting long, silvery shadows on his tent. He tells his brother to be good to their mother, and promises that when he returns, they will finally fix up that old bicycle in the garage. He signs his name, his handwriting slightly more cramped than usual. He folds the paper, slips it into an envelope, and runs his thumb over the seal. He lies back on his cot, staring up at the sloping canvas roof. He listens to the quiet breathing of the boys sleeping around him. He wonders what the coast of France looks like. He wonders if the sand there is as soft as the sand on the beaches of his childhood. He closes his eyes and tries to find peace in the quiet of the forest. The great machine of the Allied effort has done everything it can. The artists have built their ghosts. The woman in the attic has passed her poem. The giant, invisible web of deception and resistance is fully woven, draped perfectly over the eyes of an arrogant enemy. The Axis guards stand on their concrete walls, looking out at the mist, gripping their rifles. They are waiting for a frontal assault, trusting entirely in the sheer thickness of their fortifications. They are looking for a loud, crushing blow. They do not hear the whispers. They do not see the phantoms. They are entirely unaware that the foundation of their empire is already crumbling, eroded by the quiet, collective courage of millions of ordinary people working in the dark. The wait is almost over. The long night is reaching its deepest, darkest hour, just before the turn of the tide. Let the tension of that long ago waiting gently fade from your mind now. The secrets have all been told. The phantoms have vanished back into the mist. You are not waiting for a storm. You are waiting only for the soft, welcoming embrace of sleep. Imagine the gentle sound of the water lapping against the shore, a slow, rhythmic hush, hush, hush. The channel is calm. The mist is a soft blanket, wrapping the world in a quiet, protective layer. Let your own breathing fall into rhythm with that gentle water. Inhale slowly, feeling the cool, calm air. Exhale deeply, letting go of the tension in your shoulders, the worries in your mind. The day is done. The preparations are complete, and there is nothing left for you to do but rest. Close your eyes. Let the soft, whispering waves carry you away. Drift peacefully into the safe, quiet dark. Good night. The water was a heavy, churning gray, carrying the weight of a million held breaths. If you were to drift above that narrow, restless stretch of sea in the pale, bruised hours just before the dawn, you would see a vast, dark migration. The ocean was not empty. It was covered, from horizon to horizon, with the faint, geometric shadows of thousands of ships. They moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, cutting through the freezing swells, pushing through the mist toward a coastline that lay waiting in the dark. But from the sky, you cannot feel the trembling. You cannot hear the quiet, steady beating of human hearts. Let us go down, down into the belly of one of the small, flat-bottomed boats tossing violently in the chop of the waves. The air inside this metal box is thick, almost suffocating, despite the freezing spray that washes over the high steel sides. It smells sharply of diesel exhaust, damp wool, and the bitter, metallic tang of cold salt water. Standing shoulder to shoulder in the dim, gray light are young men. They are bundled in heavy, waterlogged coats, the straps of their heavy packs cutting deep into their shoulders. They sway together with the violent motion of the boat, a sea of olive-drab fabric and pale, young faces. In the middle of the crowd stands a boy who has never seen an ocean before this journey. He grew up surrounded by endless fields of tall, whispering corn, where the only waves were the wind moving through the green stalks. Now, he is surrounded by a churning, unforgiving sea, and he is profoundly, quietly terrified. He does not look at the faces of the men around him. He knows that if he looks, he will see his own fear reflected in their eyes, and he needs all the fragile strength he can muster just to keep his knees from buckling. Instead, he stares down at his own hands. They are gripping the cold steel barrel of his rifle so tightly that his knuckles are entirely white. Beneath his heavy layers, pressed securely against his chest in a pouch made of waterproofed silk, is a letter from his mother. He knows the words by heart. He traces them in his mind to block out the roaring of the boat's engine. She had written about the garden, about how the heavy summer rains had brought the hydrangeas into full, beautiful bloom. She had promised to make a peach pie the very day he walked back through their front door. He closes his eyes. For just a fleeting moment, the smell of the diesel fades, replaced by the warm, sweet scent of baking peaches and summer rain. It is a tiny, perfect sanctuary built of memory, shielding him from the overwhelming reality of the gray morning. Around him, the silence of the boys is deafening. There are no grand speeches here in the tossing dark. There is no glorious music playing. There is only the harsh, rhythmic slapping of the waves against the steel, and the collective, unspoken understanding that they are about to step out of this boat and walk into the fire. Across the water, on the high, chalky bluffs overlooking the sand, the defenders are also waiting. They are hidden behind walls of thick, reinforced concrete, peering through narrow slits into the dispersing fog. For years, their leaders had told them that this coastline was an impenetrable fortress. They had poured millions of tons of stone, steel, and arrogant certainty into the sand, believing they could build a wall high enough to keep the rest of the world away. But a wall, no matter how thick, is only a monument to fear. It is rigid, unfeeling, and entirely blind to the sheer, unstoppable force of human will. As the pale dawn slowly bleeds through the mist, the fog finally begins to lift. And the defenders, looking out through their concrete slots, feel a sudden, icy knot form in their stomachs. The sea is no longer empty. It is entirely covered with the approaching tide of ships. The grand illusion of their impenetrable fortress begins to crack, right there in the quiet gray light of the morning. The flat-bottomed boat carrying the boy from the cornfield suddenly lurches. The bottom scrapes violently against the hidden sandbar with a deep, shuddering groan. The engine cuts out. For one suspended, agonizing second, the world is perfectly, terrifyingly still. And then, the heavy steel ramp drops down. The cold wind rushes in, carrying the chaotic, deafening roar of the beach. But we will not focus on the noise. We will focus on the boy. He does not hesitate. He does not freeze. Driven by a courage he did not know he possessed, he steps forward off the edge of the ramp and plunges waist deep into the freezing, churning water. The shock of the cold is absolute, stealing the breath from his lungs. The heavy pack on his back tries to pull him under, but he fights it, his boots finding the shifting, treacherous sand beneath the waves. He pushes forward, his legs burning, the salt spray stinging his eyes. All around him, other boys are doing the same. They are wading through the surf, heads down, moving with a slow, desperate grace through the gray water. They are fragile, flesh and blood tied, crashing against a wall of concrete and steel. Amidst the overwhelming scale of this moment, there are tiny, quiet acts of unimaginable heroism. A few yards away, another young man is kneeling in the shallow water, the waves washing over his lap. He is not carrying a weapon. He carries a canvas bag marked with a simple cross. He is a medic. In his arms, he holds a stranger, a boy from another town, another life, who has fallen in the surf. The medic does not look up at the towering bluffs. He does not look at the chaos swirling around him. His entire universe has shrunk down to the pale face of the boy resting against his chest. He reaches into his bag with wet, trembling fingers, pulling out a clean white bandage. He presses it gently against the boy. He leans down, his face inches away, and speaks in a soft, steady voice, completely at odds with the roaring world around them. "I've got you," the medic whispers, his voice a calm anchor in a terrifying sea. "Just look at me. You are going to be fine. I've got you." He does not know this boy's name. He does not know his family. But in this moment of profound, terrible vulnerability, he offers him the deepest, most pure form of human love. He offers comfort in the dark. He offers the quiet assurance that, even here, at the very edge of the world, no one is entirely alone. It is almost impossible for us, sitting in the safety of our warm, peaceful lives, to truly comprehend the overwhelming reality of what it meant to hit those beaches. The stories we are told are often softened by time, the sharp edges worn down by decades of retelling. But to truly honor the boys who stepped off those ramps, we must sometimes look past the polished narratives and face the raw, unvarnished truth of their sacrifice. Because the reality of the cost of liberation is often restricted or censored on modern platforms, I have made a special collection available on Gumroad. It is a digital archive of unseen, raw images and videos from the war, the harsh, uncensored footage that shows the true, heavy toll paid on that sand. It is a sobering, profoundly moving experience to look upon their actual, unblurred history. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the morning stretches into the long, grueling hours of the afternoon, the tide begins to recede, leaving the wet sand exposed to the gray sky. The impenetrable wall of the Axis Empire has been breached. The arrogant certainty of concrete has been shattered by the soft, yielding, unbreakable courage of ordinary men. The boy from the cornfields is sitting near the top of the bluff. His uniform is completely soaked, heavy with salt and sand. He is shivering, his teeth chattering softly in the cool wind. His hands are scraped and bleeding, but he is alive. He looks back down at the beach. It is a landscape transformed, littered with the debris of the crossing. But past the wreckage, past the shoreline, the ocean continues its slow, indifferent rhythm. The water gently laps against the sand, washing away the footprints, slowly smoothing the earth back into a blank canvas. He reaches beneath his heavy coat, his fingers finding the waterproof silk pouch. He traces the shape of the letter inside. He thinks of the hydrangeas and the rain. He thinks of the quiet, safe kitchen waiting for him thousands of miles away. A profound, exhausted relief washes over him, so heavy he can barely keep his eyes open. The fortress is broken. The long, terrifying wait is over. They have taken the beach. The Axis leaders had believed that a free people, a people used to comfort and quiet lives, would simply turn back when faced with the cold, hard wall of their empire. They believed that democratic societies were soft, that they lacked the iron discipline required to conquer the dark. But they did not understand the quiet strength of love. They did not understand that a boy dreaming of a peach pie and his mother's garden will fight with a tenacity that no rigid ideology can ever match. They did not understand that when you threaten the simple, beautiful peace of the world will cross an ocean of gray water to take it back. The tide at morning had washed the illusion away. The path to the end of the war was finally, agonizingly open. Let the roaring of the ocean fade from your mind now. The gray water has settled. The storm on the beach has passed into the quiet mists of history. The boys who climbed those bluffs are resting, their incredible burden finally set down. You are safe. You are far from the cold wind and the churning surf. Feel the softness of your own bed beneath you, supporting you entirely. Let your muscles, tense from the stories of the past, finally unwind. Sink deeply into your pillows. Breathe in the calm, quiet air of your room. It does not smell of salt or diesel. It smells only of home, of safety, and of peace. As you exhale, let go of any lingering fears or worries. They belong to the day, and the day is completely done. The tide is out. The shore is quiet. Drift now, softly and slowly, into the peaceful, welcoming embrace of sleep. Good night. The earth remembers the footsteps of those who walk upon it, especially when those steps are heavy with a quiet, unbroken sorrow. Imagine a landscape so vast that the sky seems to curve down and touch the edges of the world. The deep, bitter frost of the winter has finally broken, yielding not to the gentle green of a mild spring, but to an ocean of dark, heavy earth. The snow has melted, turning the endless plains into a soft, yielding expanse of mud. It is a thick, clinging soil that pulls at the boots, demanding a profound effort for every single step forward. Above this sprawling landscape, the sky is vast and bruised. As the day begins to wane, the horizon bleeds into deep, spectacular shades of crimson, violet, and burning gold. It is a red horizon, pulling the sun down, and pulling millions of weary souls westward, step by agonizing step. This is the great return. The tide of the invasion has broken, and now, the ocean of humanity that was pushed so violently backward is slowly, relentlessly surging forward to reclaim its home. Listen to the sound of this movement. It is not the sharp, mechanical clatter of the conqueror's iron tracks. It is a low, rhythmic, organic sound. It is the sound of thousands upon thousands of boots sinking into the wet earth and pulling free again. A slow, steady heartbeat of endurance. The men and women marching across this endless plain do not look like the polished soldiers of a parade ground. Their coats are heavy with rain and dirt. Their faces are deeply lined, weathered by years of unimaginable hardship. They carry the profound, quiet exhaustion of people who have seen their world burn to ashes and yet have simply refused to stop walking. In the middle of this moving column is a man who is no longer young. His hair is streaked with gray, dust clinging to the deep creases around his eyes. He walks with a slight limp, an ache in his knee that blooms every time the damp wind blows across the steppe. He does not carry his rifle on his shoulder with pride. He uses it almost like a walking stick, a heavy crutch to help him navigate the treacherous, shifting mud. Deep in his frayed pocket, his fingers curl around a small, smooth object. It is a wooden nesting doll, no larger than a plum, its bright paint long since worn away by the constant rubbing of his thumb. He bought it at a summer fair for his little girl, in a time before the sky fell. He has carried it through the deepest snows, through the dark cellars, and across the ruined fields. It is a small, quiet piece of a life that was stolen from him. He looks up at the red horizon. He does not march for glory. He does not march for the grand, sweeping ideologies shouted from distant Capitol buildings. He marches because somewhere, beyond the setting sun, is the soil where his home used to stand. He marches because the earth belongs to those who love it, and he is going back to pull the weeds from his ruined garden. The Axis powers, in their blinding arrogance, looked at this sprawling, endless continent and saw only empty space to be conquered. They saw a map filled with resources, rivers to be crossed, and lines to be drawn. They did not see the deep, invisible roots that tie a people to their land. They believed that if you brought enough fire, the roots would simply burn. But roots hidden deep in the dark earth do not burn easily. They wait. And when the fire passes, they push upward once again, seeking the light. As the column slowly winds its way through a small, shattered valley, they come upon the remains of a village. It is a ghost of a place. The wooden cottages have been reduced to charred, blackened timbers pointing like broken fingers toward the sky. The fences are gone, the livestock vanished. It is entirely silent, save for the gentle rustling of the wind through the tall, untended grass. The marching column does not stop, but a quiet ripple of reverence passes through the men. They remove their heavy, sweat-stained caps. They lower their eyes. This village is not their own, but it is every village. It is the shared, silent grief of a million lost homes. Suddenly, from the shadows of a half-collapsed stone cellar, a figure emerges. It is an old woman. She is impossibly frail, wrapped in layers of ragged shawls, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. She has survived the occupation by hiding in the dark, living on roots, snow water, and a stubborn, fierce will to outlast the men who burned her home. She stands by the side of the muddy road and watches the column of her countrymen approach. Her eyes are milky with age, but tears are spilling over her wrinkled cheeks, washing away the dirt. She does not have any food to give them. She does not have flowers to throw at their feet. She simply raises her trembling hand, 2 fingers extended, and traces a quiet, gentle blessing in the air over the passing soldiers. The man with the wooden doll in his pocket steps slightly out of the line. He walks to the old woman, taking her frail, cold hand in his own rough, mud-stained palms. He does not speak. There are no words vast enough to hold the weight of this moment. He simply bows his head, pressing his forehead gently against her knuckles. It is a transmission of pure, overwhelming empathy. We are here, the gesture says. We are still here. And we are going home. He releases her hand and steps back into the endless, muddy rhythm of the march. Behind him, the old woman remains by the road, her hand still raised in the twilight, a solitary guardian of the ashes, watching the tide of history finally flow in the right direction. The sheer scale of this journey is almost beyond our modern comprehension. To walk for months, for years, across a ruined world, driven only by the memory of what was lost, requires a kind of endurance that leaves us humbled. To piece together the reality of this endless march, to sift through the silence of the past and find these quiet, forgotten moments of humanity buried in the vast expanse of history, takes a very similar kind of slow, tireless endurance. It is a long, solitary journey of research, reading the faded letters, deciphering the quiet diaries, and walking alongside these ghosts to ensure their stories are not lost to the wind. If you find comfort in these deeply human stories, and if you would like to help support the long, quiet hours of dedication it takes to bring them into the light, I would be so incredibly grateful for your warmth over on Ko-Fi. Even a small tip, as low as $1, acts as a warm lantern on this journey, giving me the support I need to keep uncovering these beautiful, fading voices. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the daylight finally surrenders, the red horizon deepens into a rich, bruised purple, and then into the absolute, velvet black of the steppe night. The column finally comes to a halt. There are no grand encampments. The men simply sink to the earth wherever they stand. They gather in small, huddled circles. They pull the wet wood they have scavenged throughout the day and carefully, gently coax it into small, smoky fires. The flames are kept low, casting a warm, flickering orange glow onto their exhausted faces. In one of these circles, a young boy, barely old enough to shave, pulls a battered, wooden accordion from his heavy pack. The instrument is scarred, the bellows patched with canvas and glue. He rests it on his knees and rests his cheek against the wood. Slowly, his fingers find the worn keys. He does not play a loud, triumphant march. He does not play a song of anger or revenge. He plays a lullaby. It is a soft, swaying folk tune about a quiet river reflecting the moonlight and the pale birch trees whispering in the summer wind. The notes float out into the cold night air, weaving through the smoke of the campfires. All around the camp, the men stop what they are doing. The quiet conversations fade. The scraping of spoons against tin bowls ceases. They just sit in the dark, listening to the music of the world they are trying to save. The man with the graying hair closes his eyes. The music wraps around him like a heavy, warm blanket. He can almost smell the sweet, damp scent of the birch forest behind his home. He can almost hear the soft, high laughter of his daughter chasing fireflies in the tall grass. The music softens the hard, jagged edges of his exhaustion, reminding him that the world is still capable of beauty, even after so much destruction. This was the fatal miscalculation of the Axis leaders. They believed that suffering only creates despair. They believed that if you subject a people to enough pain, enough cold, and enough loss, their spirits will break, and they will bow to the conqueror's machine. But they did not understand the alchemy of the human heart. They did not understand that when everything else is stripped away, love and memory become an unbreakable armor. The sorrow of these millions of marching souls did not turn into a fragile despair, it turned into a quiet, unstoppable momentum. They were not just an army. They were a moving testament to the simple, profound right to exist in peace. And as they sat around their tiny fires, listening to the accordion play a song of home, the grand, terrifying machine of the enemy was already collapsing, unable to hold back the sheer, overwhelming weight of a people determined to reclaim their red horizon. Let the music of that quiet accordion fade into the gentle stillness of your own room. The long march of the day is over. The soldiers are resting in the dark, their boots finally still, their hearts beating in a slow, peaceful rhythm. You, too, have reached the end of your day's journey. There is no more ground you need to cover tonight. There are no heavy burdens you need to carry into your sleep. Look out into the dark in your mind's eye. The sky is vast, calm, and protective. The fires are burning low, offering nothing but warmth and safety. Feel the heavy, comfortable weight of your blankets holding you gently against the mattress. Let your breathing become slow and deep, rising and falling like the quiet chests of the men resting on the steppe. Inhale the peace of the night. Exhale the exhaustion of the day. The world is quiet. The earth is still. Close your eyes, let the soft, whispering winds of the past carry you away, and drift down into a deep, dreamless, and beautiful sleep. Good night. There are places in the ocean so impossibly blue and quiet, they seem like fragments of a forgotten dream. Imagine a vast, unbroken expanse of water. The Pacific is not merely an ocean, it is a world unto itself, a sprawling universe of deep, silent currents and blinding sunlight. Scattered across this liquid desert are tiny, isolated specks of land. Islands born of ancient fire, ringed by fragile, white coral and crowned with emerald canopies of palm leaves. For thousands of years, these shores knew only the gentle, rhythmic sigh of the tide and the soft calls of seabirds. They were sanctuaries of profound, untouched peace. But the grand, arrogant mapmakers of the Axis Empire drew a vast circle around this ocean. They looked at these tiny, beautiful specks of coral and saw only stepping stones. They believed they could stretch a ribbon of steel across the water, a barrier so vast and remote that no one would ever dare to cross it. Let us look closely at a young boy, thousands of miles from the cool, shaded porches of his home. He is sitting on the rusted, vibrating steel deck of a transport ship. The tropical heat is not just warm, it is a heavy, suffocating blanket that presses the breath from his lungs. His green canvas uniform is stained dark with sweat, clinging to his tired shoulders. He holds a letter in his hands, the paper soft and fragile from the humidity. It is from his sister. She tells him about the county fair, about the blue ribbons won for sweet preserves, and how the nights are finally getting a little cooler back home. He reads the words over and over, letting the image of a crisp autumn evening wash over his mind, a quiet, desperate oasis in the middle of a sweltering, metallic reality. He looks out over the railing at the tiny sliver of green on the horizon. He cannot understand why a war has brought him to this impossibly remote edge of the earth. He is terrified. But he carefully folds the letter, wraps it in a piece of oilcloth, and places it in his breast pocket. He does not step onto the landing craft for the sake of an empire. He steps forward because he wants to cross the vast water and finally go back to that quiet, cool evening at home. Now, let us move to the island itself. Deep beneath the roots of the palm trees, carved into the unyielding, dark volcanic rock, the air is thick, stale, and completely devoid of light. A young defender sits in the damp gloom. He is hungry, he is exhausted, and he is profoundly, heartbreakingly alone. His leaders have told him that he must hold this tiny speck of sand at all costs. They have demanded that he give his spirit to the emperor, that he become a piece of the stone itself. But in the dark, he is only a boy. By the faint, sputtering light of a single candle, he is looking at a small, carefully folded silk flag covered in handwritten signatures and well wishes from his village. He traces the familiar characters of his father's name. He knows, with a quiet, settling certainty, that the vast, invincible fleet he was promised is not coming. The empire has overreached, stretching its arms so wide that its fingers have gone numb. He is stranded. He listens to the distant, muffled roar of the ocean outside his cave, and he feels a sorrow so deep it defies all the rigid poetry of his training. The tragedy of the Axis was not just the destruction it brought to the world, but the profound, tragic isolation it forced upon its own people, abandoning them on lonely, scorching islands for the sake of pride. When the quiet of the island is finally broken, the paradise is torn apart. The soft white sand of the beaches, made of millions of years of crushed seashells, is covered in a heavy, gray ash. The palm trees are splintered, standing like ragged ghosts in the smoke. We will not dwell on the noise. We will look at a moment of quiet humanity in the aftermath. A young medic, his face smeared with soot and his hands shaking from exhaustion, kneels beside a wounded enemy soldier in the shadow of a broken coral wall. The young defender is staring up at the harsh, blue sky, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The medic does not see a monster. He does not see an empire. He only sees a boy, just like him, terrified and far from home. The medic unscrews his canvas canteen. Water is more precious than gold on this scorching sand, but he gently lifts the defender's head and lets a few drops of the cool water fall onto his cracked, parched lips. It is a tiny, fleeting gesture. A microscopic spark of compassion in a universe of destruction. But it is in these moments that the true failure of the Axis is revealed. They believed that war could strip away all humanity, reducing men to unfeeling machines of conquest. They did not understand that compassion is a stubborn, deeply rooted weed that will grow even in the ashes of a coral beach. It is almost impossible to truly fathom the profound isolation of those days. To be stranded on a speck of coral, thousands of miles from anything familiar, enveloped by the vast, uncaring ocean. When we reflect on that extreme loneliness, it reminds us of how deeply the human heart craves connection. We are not meant to be islands. We are meant to share our stories, our fears, and our understanding of the world with others who care just as deeply as we do. If you feel a yearning to connect over these profound, often overlooked human stories, I would love to invite you to join our close-knit community over on Patreon. It is a warm, welcoming space dedicated to the uncensored, quiet truths of history. There, you can access free podcasts, raw and unblurred video archives, and join a circle of people who share your passion for deep, historical realities. There is also a small tip jar if you wish to support the long hours of research that make these stories possible. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the long, blistering day finally draws to a close, the sun dips below the horizon, painting the Pacific in incredibly soft, forgiving shades of lavender and gold. The heat of the day lifts, replaced by a gentle, cooling ocean breeze that rustles the few surviving fronds of the palm trees. The island grows quiet. The men, exhausted beyond all measure of understanding, sink down onto the cooling sand. They rest their heads on their canvas packs. They do not talk of victory. They only listen to the rhythmic, soothing sound of the waves returning to the shore. The ocean does not judge. It simply washes the beach. With every gentle wave, it smooths the chaotic footprints. It carries away the gray ash, slowly, patiently restoring the white, pristine purity of the coral sand. The water is a balm, an ancient promise that no matter how terrible the storms of men may be, the earth will eventually heal. The boy with the letter in his pocket lies on his back, looking up at the sky. Away from the glare of the cities, the stars over the Pacific are a breathtaking, overwhelming canopy of light. They are the exact same stars shining down on his sister's home. He traces imaginary lines between them, finding comfort in the vast, unchanging beauty of the universe. The island is small, but the sky connects him to everyone he loves. The great Axis Empire believed that distance was their shield. They believed that an ocean so large could absorb the will of a free people and scatter it like sea foam. But they underestimated the relentless, quiet endurance of boys who simply wanted to go home. The island hopped across a liquid desert, enduring unimaginable heat and profound isolation, driven by a love that could cross any ocean. Let the gentle, rhythmic sound of the waves enter your mind now. The long, hot day of history is over. The ashes have washed away, leaving only the soft, cool sand. You are not stranded on a lonely island. You are safe in your own room, anchored to the present, surrounded by the quiet comforts of your home. The struggles of the day are behind you, drifting away on the outgoing tide. Take a slow, deep breath in, imagining the cool, clean scent of the ocean breeze. As you breathe out, let the tension in your body completely dissolve. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts become as light and untethered as a small cloud drifting across a starlit sky. The ocean is rocking the world to sleep. The rhythm is steady, peaceful, and eternal. Close your eyes. Let the soft water carry you away. Drift now, smoothly and gently, into a deep, beautiful rest. Good night. The deepest winter does not announce its arrival, it simply steals the sound from the world. Imagine an ancient forest, so thick and vast that the dark trunks of the pine trees seem to weave together into an endless, living wall. It is December, and the world has been swallowed by a profound, freezing fog. The snow here does not fall with a whimsical flutter, it descends with a heavy, purposeful quiet, piling high on the branches until they bow toward the earth. The air is so cold it aches to breathe, smelling sharply of crushed pine needles, damp earth, and the metallic bite of the frost. In this sprawling, silent wilderness, the war seemed to have paused, caught in the frozen breath of the season. Deep in the woods, a young soldier sits in a hollowed-out crater in the snow. He is wrapped in every piece of clothing he owns: 2 pairs of wool socks, a damp sweater, a heavy overcoat, and a knitted scarf that smells faintly of the cedar chest in his childhood bedroom. He is shivering, a slow, deep tremor that he cannot stop. He rests his chin on his knees, looking out into the impenetrable white mist. For weeks, the rumor among the boys in the forest was that the long struggle was finally winding down. The great machine of the enemy was broken, they said. The end was just over the horizon. And so, in this quiet, frozen place, they let their guard drop just a fraction. They allowed themselves to dream of home. The young soldier pulls his hands inside the sleeves of his coat to preserve whatever fragile warmth remains. He closes his eyes and tries to picture the radiator in his family's hallway. He imagines pressing his frozen hands against the warm, painted iron. He tries to summon the smell of his father's pipe tobacco and the sound of the radio playing softly in the kitchen. He builds a small, imaginary fire in his mind, just to keep the paralyzing cold at bay. He does not know that just a few miles away, hidden entirely by the thick, white shroud of the fog, an entire army is waiting in the dark. The Axis leaders, facing the twilight of their empire, had gathered the very last of their strength. They pulled men from the deep reserves, scraping together whatever fuel and steel remained, and pointed them toward this quiet, sleeping forest. They painted their machines white. They wrapped the hooves of their horses in rags to muffle their footsteps. They moved like phantoms, relying entirely on the absolute secrecy of the mist. They were desperate. It was a desperation born of the sudden, terrifying realization that the world they had tried to conquer was now closing in around them. And so, they decided to throw everything they had left into one final, massive surprise, hoping to shatter the quiet line in the snow. When the silence finally broke, it did not happen with a grand declaration. It happened with a sudden, overwhelming suddenness that seemed to tear the very fabric of the forest apart. Shadows poured out of the white fog. The quiet woods were instantly transformed into a disorienting, chaotic swirl of snow, noise, and confusion. The young soldier in his frozen crater was jolted from his dreams of the warm radiator. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the ice, his numb fingers fumbling with the heavy steel of his rifle. The enemy had achieved the impossible. They had completely surprised the line. They pushed deep into the forest, creating a massive, bulging curve in the map. The cold, unfeeling mathematics of the assault suggested that the boys in the woods would simply break, scatter, and surrender to the sudden, terrifying weight of the attack. But once again, the grand architects of the Axis Empire failed to understand the human heart. In the freezing, blinding chaos, the young boys who had been dreaming of home did not shatter. They bent under the immense pressure, yes. They were pushed back through the snow, isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. But they did not break. In a small, stone farmhouse surrounded by the dense pines, a group of these exhausted, freezing soldiers huddled together. The windows were blown out, letting the biting wind swirl through the small rooms. They had no heavy artillery. They had almost no food. But sitting on the dusty floorboards, a medic opens his canvas bag and pulls out a single, frozen bar of chocolate. He uses the handle of his knife to carefully break it into tiny, equal pieces. He passes them around the circle. No one speaks. They just place the dark chocolate on their tongues, letting it slowly melt, sharing this microscopic piece of comfort in the dark. It is a quiet, profound covenant. They look at each other in the dim, gray light, and a silent agreement passes between them. They will not give up this house. They will not give up this forest. They will stand their ground in the snow, together. The fog that hid this massive, desperate counteroffensive is a powerful reminder of how much of history happens where we cannot see it. We often think of this era in broad strokes and lines drawn on maps and massive movements of troops. But beneath the surface, there was a vast, hidden world of secrets. The surprise in the freezing fog was just one moment where the unseen suddenly revealed itself. So much of the war was guided by whispers, by quiet sabotage, and by shadow operations that deliberately left no trace. If you find yourself captivated by the mysteries of the past, by the secrets hidden in the fog and the quiet courage of those who operated entirely in the dark, I would love to share those stories with you. I have a warm, welcoming email newsletter, and when you join, I will send you a free copy of my ebook, The Shadow War: 5 Top Secret Operations That Shaped World War II. Together, we can explore the hidden realities that changed the course of history without the world ever knowing. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the days dragged on in the frozen forest, the Axis machine slowly began to realize the terrible truth of their situation. The surprise was over, and the fog was beginning to lift. The heavy skies, which had shielded them for so long, finally parted. A pale, freezing sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the snow-covered pines. And with the clear sky came the deep, resonant thrum of the Allied planes, returning to the air. But even before the planes arrived, the final offensive had already stalled. The conquerors had pushed as far as their meager supplies would carry them. Their tanks, meant to drive all the way to the sea, simply coughed and died in the snow, their fuel tanks completely hollow. The young Axis soldiers, driven by desperate orders and hollow promises, found themselves exactly where they had started, freezing, exhausted, and entirely alone in a hostile world. The spirit of the boys in the farmhouses, at the snowy crossroads, and in the frozen craters had been stronger than the final, desperate lunge of the Empire. They had held the line with nothing but stubborn resilience and the quiet, fierce love they held for one another. When the silence finally returned to the forest, it was a different kind of quiet. It was not the tense, pregnant silence of a waiting storm. It was the heavy, exhausted peace of a fire that has finally burned itself out to ash. The young soldier steps out of the stone farmhouse. The wind has died down. The air is perfectly still, and the sky above is a brilliant, blinding blue. He takes a deep breath of the freezing air. It hurts his lungs, but it is the sweet, crisp air of survival. He looks at the trees, their branches still heavy with snow. He knows that the worst is finally behind them. The great machine of the enemy has spent its final breath in these woods. They have nothing left. The long, dark winter of the war is finally beginning to thaw, even as the snow remains on the ground. He reaches into his pocket and touches the scarf his mother knitted. It is damp, but it is still there. He will be going home. Let the profound, peaceful silence of that snowy forest settle over you now. The storm has passed. The sudden shadows and the fog have vanished, leaving behind only the gentle, quiet beauty of the snow. Imagine the soft, white flakes drifting down outside your window, covering the world in a thick, insulating blanket of peace. The snow muffles all the sharp noises of the day. It hides the worries, the stress, and the rush of the world, leaving you in a perfectly still, quiet haven. You are safe. You are warm. The cold wind of the past cannot reach you here. Feel the comforting weight of your blankets, like the soft embrace of a deep, restful winter night. Let your breathing slow down, matching the gentle, lazy descent of the snowflakes in your mind. Inhale the calm, cool air. Exhale all the lingering tension in your muscles. There are no more surprises waiting in the dark. The line is held, the morning has come, and now it is time for rest. Close your eyes, let the silence of the snow completely surround you, and drift away into a deep, peaceful, and unbroken sleep. Good night. Even stone, when asked to hold the weight of too much arrogance, will eventually turn to dust. Imagine a twilight so incredibly quiet that you can hear the soft, powdery shifting of plaster settling against the cobblestones. The sun is sinking below a jagged, broken skyline. This was once a city of grand, sweeping boulevards, a place where leaders stood on massive balconies and promised their people 1,000 years of unbroken glory. They built monuments of heavy granite and cold marble, structures designed to intimidate the world and whisper of an eternal, unyielding empire. But empires do not live in the stone. They live in the fragile, beating hearts of the people they claim to protect. And when the heart is broken, the stone will always follow. Now, the grand avenues are choked with a soft, gray ash. It looks almost like snow in the fading light, covering the ruined statues and the shattered glass in a quiet, erasing blanket. The noise of the long, terrible struggle has finally stopped. The air no longer vibrates with the deafening roar of machines or the terrifying wail of sirens. There is only a hushed, surreal stillness, the kind of absolute quiet that follows a very long, very dark storm. In the cellar of what used to be a bustling bakery, a small group of people sits in the gathering dark. They are covered in a fine layer of white dust, making them look like pale ghosts in the dim light of a single, sputtering candle. Among them is an old man, his hands trembling slightly as he holds a small, wooden brush. He is not brushing his coat. He is carefully, meticulously brushing the dust away from the face of a pocket watch. The glass is cracked, a spiderweb of tiny fractures obscuring the delicate, golden hands beneath. It does not tick anymore. The delicate gears inside were shattered days ago. But he cleans it anyway, his thumb rubbing the tarnished silver casing with a gentle, rhythmic reverence. It belonged to his father. He remembers the day he was given it, a bright summer afternoon that feels like it belongs to another universe. In this ruined city, where the grand monuments of the empire have been crushed into gravel, this broken watch is the only piece of history he truly cares about. He places it carefully into his breast pocket, close to his heart. It is a tiny, fragile anchor holding him to a time when the world made sense. This was the tragic irony of the Axis leaders. They obsessed over massive architecture. They believed they could carve their legacy into the earth with monumental pillars and endless arches, forcing the world to remember them through sheer scale. But they forgot that true endurance is intimate. They forgot that when the sky falls, people do not cling to statues of generals. They cling to a cracked pocket watch. They cling to a faded photograph. They cling to each other. Above the cellar, a young soldier is walking slowly down the center of the ruined street. He has marched thousands of miles from the east to be here. His uniform is heavy, torn, and entirely coated in the same gray dust that covers the city. He is carrying his rifle not like a weapon, but loosely, slung over his shoulder like a heavy burden he is finally allowed to put down. He is a conqueror, walking through the very heart of the fallen empire. But he does not feel like a conqueror. He just feels profoundly, unbelievably tired. He stops by the edge of a shattered stone fountain. The water has long since stopped flowing, the basin filled with rubble. He sits down on the edge, resting his face in his rough, calloused hands. He closes his eyes and lets out a long, slow breath. The silence of the city is almost deafening to him, after months of endless, roaring noise. He hears a tiny sound. A soft, scraping noise coming from the doorway of a ruined apartment building across the street. He opens his eyes. Standing in the shadows of the doorframe is a little girl. She is perhaps 6 years old, wearing a coat that is far too large for her, the hem dragging in the dust. She is holding a small, chipped porcelain teacup. She looks at the soldier, her eyes wide and dark in her pale, dust-covered face. The soldier does not reach for his weapon. He slowly reaches into the deep pocket of his heavy coat. His fingers brush past his spare ammunition, finding a small, crumpled piece of waxed paper. Inside is a single cube of sugar, saved from a ration weeks ago, meant for a moment when he needed a reminder of sweetness. He holds it out in his open palm. He does not speak. He just offers it to her, his hand steady in the twilight. The little girl hesitates. She looks back into the dark hallway behind her, then looks back at the soldier. Very slowly, she steps out of the shadows. Her small, scuffed shoes make no sound on the dusty road. She walks up to the soldier, reaches out with a tiny, trembling hand, and takes the sugar cube. She puts it in her teacup, gives the soldier a small, deeply solemn nod, and turns back into the shadows of her home. The young soldier leans back against the broken fountain. A single, warm tear traces a clean line down his dusty cheek. The empire has fallen. The grand, terrifying machine is broken. But humanity, in all its fragile, quiet beauty, is still here. When we look back at the twilight of this era, it is easy to become overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the ruins. The fallen buildings and the swept-away borders can sometimes make history feel abstract, like a distant story that happened to people who were somehow different from us. But they were not different. They were exactly like us. They were people who loved their children, who cherished their grandfather's watches, and who found profound grace in a single cube of sugar. To truly grasp the reality of their lives, it is so important to hold onto the tangible pieces of the past. When we can hold a physical artifact, or when we can see their world faithfully recreated on a screen, the abstract history suddenly becomes deeply personal. We see the truth in the wear of a button, or the faded ink of a letter. If you feel a desire to connect with this history in a tangible way, to hold a piece of the past so that these stories are never forgotten, there are wonderful ways to do so. I highly recommend taking a quiet evening to explore the incredible World War II memorabilia available on Amazon, or perhaps watching a deeply moving, beautifully crafted historical film. Holding a piece of that era, or immersing yourself in its visual history, builds a profound bridge between their twilight and our peaceful present. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the twilight deepens into night, the ruined city is bathed in a soft, silver light. The moon has risen, casting long, gentle shadows across the broken cobblestones. Without the glare of street lamps or the harsh spotlights of the regime, the stars have returned to the sky, shining with a cold, clear brilliance over the quiet earth. In a building that has lost its roof, exposing the top floor entirely to the night sky, a strange and beautiful thing begins to happen. Someone has found a piano. It is miraculously unharmed, tucked into the corner of a half-destroyed parlor. Slowly, hesitantly, a hand presses down on the yellowed ivory keys. A single, clear note rings out into the cool night air. It floats over the dust, over the broken statues, and over the quiet, sleeping soldiers. Then, another note follows. And another. It is a waltz. A slow, melancholic, but undeniably beautiful waltz. The person playing does not strike the keys with anger or triumph. They play with a soft, mourning gentleness. It is a song for the things that were lost, and a quiet prayer for the things that survived. Down in the cellars, people open their eyes in the dark, listening to the music drifting down through the rubble. The old man touches his pocket watch. The little girl in the oversized coat traces the edge of her teacup. The young soldier resting by the fountain lets his head fall back, watching the stars, and lets the melody wash over his exhausted soul. The Axis leaders believed that they could orchestrate the world. They believed they could force humanity to march to the rigid, deafening beat of their own dark drums. They built their 1,000-year empire on fear, believing that fear was the strongest force on earth. But as the waltz played over the ruins of their capital, the truth was finally laid bare. Fear is a fragile architecture. It crumbles under its own weight. What lasts is the music. What lasts is the shared cup of water. What lasts is the stubborn, beautiful desire of ordinary people to step out of the shadows and find the light again. The empire was gone, returned to the dust from which it was built. But the people remained. And tomorrow, when the sun rose over the broken skyline, they would step out of their cellars. They would brush the dust from their coats. They would find a broom, and they would slowly, carefully, begin to sweep the cobblestones. They would start to rebuild, not an empire of stone, but a world of quiet, ordinary peace. Let the soft, lingering notes of that distant piano settle into your own mind now. The ruins are far behind us. The long twilight of the past has faded into the gentle, safe darkness of your own room. The dust has settled, the world is quiet, and you are entirely secure. Take a deep, slow breath in, feeling the calm, clean air fill your lungs. There is no heavy ash here. There is only the comforting stillness of the present. As you breathe out, let go of any tension you are holding. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw relax. The struggles of the day, much like the crumbled stone of the past, no longer need to be carried. You can set them down. You can rest. Feel the soft warmth of your bed beneath you. It is a safe haven. Listen to the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, a steady, peaceful melody that belongs only to you. The night is here to protect you. Close your eyes. Let the gentle darkness wrap around you like a soft blanket and drift away into a deep, beautiful, and healing sleep. Good night. Even when the calendar promises the gentle arrival of spring, the earth sometimes weeps in shadows. Imagine an island born of ancient fire, rising from the vast, endless blue of the Pacific. To the eyes of a passing seabird, it is merely a tiny, tear-shaped speck of rock. But to the men who have come to its shores, it is an entirely alien world. The beaches here are not made of soft, white coral. They are made of volcanic ash. It is a coarse, heavy, black sand that swallows the boots and traps the heat of the sun, radiating a dull, sulphurous warmth into the air. The wind across this island does not smell of salt and blossoms. It carries the sharp, bitter scent of brimstone and the deep, heavy exhaustion of thousands of men. Let us quietly approach a young soldier resting in a shallow trench dug into this black earth. His canvas uniform, once a crisp olive green, is completely coated in the dark, abrasive ash. It clings to the sweat on his brow, it lines the deep creases around his eyes, and it coats his hands in a fine, dark powder. He is so incredibly young, yet his eyes hold the weary depth of an old man who has walked too many miles in the dark. He sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest, ignoring the low, distant rumble of the world around him. In his ash-stained hands, he holds a piece of folded paper. It is a letter from his mother, carried across the vast ocean in the belly of a metal ship, finding its way to him on this barren, smoking rock. He reads the words slowly, his lips moving silently, savoring each syllable as if it were a drop of cool water. She writes about the month of April back home. She tells him that the soil in the garden has finally thawed, rich and fragrant with the promise of rain. She describes how the tiny, pale green shoots of the daffodils are just beginning to push their way through the earth near the front porch. She says that the air in the evenings is finally growing soft, and that his old dog still sleeps by the screen door, waiting for the sound of his footsteps on the gravel driveway. The boy closes his eyes. He presses the letter against his face, trying to breathe in the scent of the paper, hoping to catch a faint, lingering ghost of his mother's perfume or the smell of his childhood home. For a brief, beautiful moment, he is not sitting in the volcanic ash. He is standing on his front porch, feeling the cool, sweet spring rain on his face. He carefully folds the letter and tucks it deep into his pocket, buttoning it safely against his heart. It is his armor. It is the only thing tethering his soul to the gentle world he left behind. He looks out at the jagged, black landscape, and he feels a quiet, desperate ache. The empire that forced him here believed that this black sand could be an unbreakable wall. But this boy does not care about the ambitions of empires. He only cares about the daffodils and the dog waiting by the door. As the season turns, the geography of the struggle shifts further north, to another island, but the sorrow only deepens. Here, the landscape is not black sand, but lush, rolling hills and ancient stone. But the spring has brought no joy to this place. It has only brought the rain. It is a relentless, heavy, gray rain that falls for days without end. It turns the green hillsides into treacherous rivers of red clay. It soaks through the canvas tents, it ruins the rations, and it chills the men to the very marrow of their bones. The sky is a perpetual, weeping canopy, mirroring the quiet devastation of the earth below. Beneath these weeping hills, hidden away from the gray light of the sky, is a vast network of natural limestone caves. The air inside is damp, cool, and smells strongly of wet stone and fear. In the flickering, golden light of a single, hoarded candle, a young woman sits on the damp cave floor. She is a local of this island, a student who had been preparing for her exams just weeks ago. Now, she wears a muddy, oversized uniform, drafted by the desperate, crumbling forces of the occupying empire to act as a nurse in the dark. She holds a damp, ragged cloth, gently wiping the forehead of a young, local boy resting beside her. He is burning with fever, murmuring softly in his sleep, calling out for his sister. The young woman hums a gentle, traditional lullaby, a melody her grandmother taught her when the island was still a place of quiet fishing villages and sweet potato fields. In her free hand, she holds a small, beautifully carved wooden comb. It is adorned with the delicate image of a cherry blossom. It was a gift from her mother on her last birthday. She runs her thumb over the smooth wood. The empire's leaders had broadcast terrifying stories over the radio, telling the people of this island that the approaching men across the water were monsters, that they would bring only cruelty and despair. They demanded that the people fight to the very last breath, sacrificing everything for a distant throne. But sitting in the damp dark, listening to the rain dripping slowly from the cave ceiling, the young woman looks at the carved blossom on her comb. She realizes, with a quiet, breaking heart, that the true cruelty was forcing her people into these caves. The true tragedy was an empire so blinded by its own pride that it would rather see this beautiful island consumed by fire than admit that the war was lost. She does not want to be a sacrifice. She just wants to walk in the sunlight again. She just wants the rain to stop. The unimaginable horror of these final battles, where the rigid demands of an inflexible empire collided with the soft, fragile reality of human life, is something that defies simple description. The scale of the suffering, the sheer, exhausting weight of the mud, the ash, and the rain, created a landscape that was almost apocalyptic. When we look back at the twilight of this era, the history we are often presented with is sanitized. The sharpest, most painful edges are blurred or removed entirely, making the stories easier to digest but stripping away the profound, raw truth of what these ordinary people endured. To truly understand the cost of the peace we enjoy today, we must sometimes be willing to look at the unblurred history, to see the harsh realities that modern platforms often restrict. If you feel a deep, respectful desire to confront this history honestly, I have carefully curated a digital collection of unseen, raw images and videos from the war over on Gumroad. It is a sobering, profoundly moving archive that honors their sacrifice by refusing to look away from their truth. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the long, agonizing days of the spring rain continue, a strange and quiet phenomenon begins to occur amidst the devastation. The grand illusion of the Axis leaders, the idea that their soldiers and the people under their control would fight with mindless, mechanical obedience to the bitter end, begins to fracture under the weight of shared, overwhelming exhaustion. On a muddy, ruined hillside, the rain has briefly slowed to a soft, misting drizzle. A young soldier from across the ocean, the boy who dreamed of the daffodils, is carefully walking up the slippery clay path. He is looking for a place to rest. Suddenly, he sees a movement in the shadows of a collapsed stone wall. He raises his rifle, his heart pounding in his chest. But as the figure slowly emerges into the gray light, he slowly lowers the barrel. It is the young nurse from the caves. She is covered in mud, her uniform torn, her face pale and exhausted. She is completely unarmed. She stands there, trembling slightly in the cool mist, looking at the boy in the ash-stained uniform. For a long, suspended moment, the two of them just stare at each other. They do not speak the same language. They have been told by the world that they are mortal enemies, destined to destroy one another on this weeping island. But they do not see monsters. The young soldier sees a girl who looks exactly like the girls back in his hometown, scared, tired, and caught in a storm she did not create. The young nurse looks at the boy and sees someone who is just as exhausted, just as muddy, and just as far from home as the boys she left behind in the dark. The soldier slowly reaches to his belt. He unclips his metal canteen. He unscrews the cap, takes a single step forward, and gently holds it out to her. The young woman hesitates. She remembers the terrifying broadcasts. She remembers the warnings. But her throat is so dry, and the boy's eyes hold only a quiet, gentle sorrow. She steps forward, her small, trembling hands reaching out to take the metal flask. She lifts it to her lips and drinks the cool, clean water. When she lowers the canteen, she looks at the boy and offers a small, incredibly fragile bow of her head. A silent, profound thank you passing through the mist. In that microscopic moment, the grand, rigid architecture of the Axis Empire completely collapsed. Their power relied on hatred. It relied on absolute separation. But when a boy from a cornfield hands his water to a girl on a distant, ruined island, the hatred dissolves. The shared, unbroken thread of human empathy proves to be infinitely stronger than the demands of any dictator. The black rain of that terrible spring was washing away the old world. It was a painful, agonizing rebirth, but the ash and the mud were slowly, finally beginning to yield. The empire was broken not just by steel and fire, but by the quiet, stubborn refusal of ordinary people to completely surrender their humanity in the dark. As the evening falls over the island, the heavy rain finally, mercifully stops. The clouds begin to part, revealing a sky dusted with brilliant, peaceful stars. The ocean breeze sweeps over the hills, carrying away the scent of smoke, leaving only the clean, earthy smell of wet soil and the faint, sweet promise of a new dawn. Let the image of that clearing sky settle into your own mind now. The long, weeping storms of the past are over. The mud has dried. The black ash has been washed clean. You are entirely safe. You are far away from the dark caves and the heavy rains. Feel the soft, dry warmth of your own bed. It is a sanctuary, a quiet, peaceful island in a calm and gentle sea. Listen to the steady, comforting rhythm of your own breathing. It is the sound of safety. It is the sound of peace. Take a deep, slow breath in, filling your lungs with the calm night air. As you exhale, let go of any lingering sorrow or tension from the stories of the day. Let them drift away like mist over the ocean, fading until they are completely gone. The world is quiet now. The ghosts are at rest, their burdens finally set down. Close your eyes, let the soft, starlit silence wrap around you, and drift away into a deep, beautiful, and healing sleep. Good night. There is a stillness that falls over the earth just before the fabric of the world is forever changed. Imagine a desert, vast and empty, under a sky that is just beginning to pale with the approach of morning. The air is cool, carrying the faint, dry scent of sagebrush and ancient dust. Far away from the front lines, far from the muddy trenches and the ruined cities, a small group of men and women stand in the quiet dark. They are not soldiers. They wear simple cotton shirts and round spectacles. Their hands do not hold rifles, their hands hold chalk, pencils, and the heavy, terrifying weight of the universe's most profound secrets. Among them is a young man, leaning against the cold metal of a jeep. He is holding a small, leather-bound notebook. His fingers are trembling, but not from the desert chill. He has spent years in quiet, brightly lit rooms, covering blackboards with elegant, sweeping numbers, trying to unlock the very energy that powers the stars. And now, the lock has turned. He looks up at the fading night sky. He thinks of his wife, sleeping safely in a wooden house thousands of miles away. He thinks of the sheer, beautiful fragility of a human life. He writes a single, quiet sentence in his notebook, a whisper to himself in the dark: I hope we have found a way to stop the dark, and not a way to end the world. He closes the book just as the horizon begins to glow. They were searching for a way to stop a war that had consumed the globe, a war driven by an empire that simply refused to stop marching. They believed that if they could capture the fire of the sun, the shadow of the Axis would finally have to retreat. Now, let us travel across the vast, sleeping ocean, to a morning that feels entirely ordinary. It is a warm, humid morning in a bustling city by the sea. The cicadas have already begun their rhythmic, hypnotic hum in the old willow trees. The sky is a clear, unbroken blue, holding the promise of a long, peaceful summer day. The sirens had sounded earlier, a low, mournful wail, but the sky had remained empty, and so the city went back to its quiet routines. In a small, wooden house with sliding paper doors, a mother is kneeling on a tatami mat. She is carefully pouring warm, fragrant green tea into 2 small ceramic cups. The cups are delicate, painted with tiny, intricate blue sparrows. Across from her sits her young daughter, dressed in a light, cotton summer kimono. The little girl is holding a square of bright red paper, carefully folding the corners, creasing the edges with her small, soft thumbs. She is making a paper crane. The mother smiles, watching the concentration on her daughter's face. The war has taken so much from them, the food on their table is scarce, the father is far away, and the nights are filled with fear. But in this microscopic moment, sitting in the warm morning light, there is a profound, beautiful peace. The mother hands the teacup to her daughter. The porcelain is warm against their hands. They do not hear the single, high-flying airplane drifting silently through the blue sky above them. They do not know that the world they understand is about to end. When the flash came, it was not a noise. It was a light. It was a light so brilliant, so absolute and terrifying, that it seemed to erase the very shadows of the earth. It was as if a second sun had suddenly, violently blinked into existence just above the rooftops. In the fraction of a heartbeat, the elegant mathematics of the desert were translated into a profound, overwhelming reality. We will not linger on the fire. We will not walk through the ashes. That is a heavy, dark path, and tonight, we are looking for the quiet endurance of the human spirit. Instead, we will look at what happens when the dust finally, slowly begins to settle. We will look at the profound, heavy silence that enveloped the world in the days that followed. The Axis leaders had built their empire on the rigid belief that they could endure any hardship, that their willpower was a shield against any weapon. They had asked their people to fight to the very last breath, to sacrifice their homes, their children, and their futures for the sake of a grand, unyielding pride. But pride is a fragile thing when faced with the raw, terrifying power of the universe. The flash in the sky shattered the illusion of endless war. It brought a sudden, sobering realization that the tools of destruction had grown too vast, too terrible, for the war to continue. The long, dark night of the struggle was pierced by a light so agonizingly bright that it forced the world to finally lower its hands and stop the fighting. In the ruins of the city, days later, the air is still thick with gray dust. The wooden house is gone. The willow trees are gone. But walking slowly through the quiet debris is an old man. He leans heavily on a walking stick, his face covered in a cloth to filter the ash. He is searching for anything familiar, anything that can tether him to the life he knew before the morning of the flash. He stops near a pile of blackened stones. He kneels down, his old joints aching in the damp air. Carefully, with trembling fingers, he brushes the ash away from the ground. There, half buried in the soot, is a small, ceramic teacup. It is chipped, the delicate rim broken, but the tiny blue sparrows painted on its side are still there, perfectly preserved beneath the dust. He picks it up, holding it as gently as one might hold a wounded bird. He closes his eyes, and a single, silent tear traces a path through the ash on his cheek. He does not cry out in anger. He only feels a deep, ocean-like sorrow for the fragility of the world. He slips the broken teacup into his pocket. He will keep it always. He will carry it as a quiet reminder of the morning when the world changed, and as a promise to remember the fragile beauty that was lost. These moments, where the entire trajectory of humanity shifted in a single, silent heartbeat, carry a weight that is incredibly difficult to put into words. To respectfully document these heavy, profound turning points of the modern world, and to sift through the ashes of history to find the deeply human stories beneath, requires a gentle, quiet dedication. It is a long, often solitary journey through fading archives and fragile memories. If you find value in these quiet reflections, and if you would like to support the immense time and care it takes to preserve these fading echoes, I would be deeply honored by your support over on Ko-Fi. Even a small tip, as low as $1, acts as a comforting lantern, helping me continue this vital work of remembrance. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The news of the flash echoed across the oceans, rolling over the waves and into the living rooms, the trenches, and the quiet forests of the world. When the young scientist in the desert heard that the lock had truly been opened over a sleeping city, he did not cheer. He walked out into the cool evening air of the desert, far away from the celebrating crowds. He looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over the earth for billions of years. He felt an overwhelming, crushing sense of responsibility. The machine of war had been broken, yes. The axis could no longer march. The terrible, grinding friction that had consumed the globe for so many years had been brought to a sudden, absolute halt. But the cost was a new, heavy shadow that would stretch across all the generations to come. He sat down in the sand, resting his head in his hands. He knew that humanity had crossed a threshold from which it could never return. They had stolen the fire, and now they had to learn, with quiet, desperate wisdom, how to keep it from burning down the house they all shared. Back in the ruined city, the rain begins to fall. It is a dark, heavy rain, washing the ash from the stones and settling the dust. The old man with the teacup in his pocket finds shelter under a piece of twisted metal. He watches the water pool in the rubble. But even here, in the epicenter of the end of an era, the earth has not forgotten how to live. Weeks later, pushing through the charred soil and the gray ash, a tiny, impossibly fragile green shoot will appear. It will not care about the wars of men. It will not know about the flash or the desert or the mathematics of the stars. It will simply reach for the sunlight, driven by the quiet, unbreakable instinct to survive. The axis lost because they believed they could control the world through rigidity and force. But the world is not rigid. It is soft, it is fragile, and it is endlessly resilient. The flash before the dawn was a terrible, heartbreaking price to pay, but it finally forced the conquerors to look at the sky and realize they were not gods. They were only men, and the time for destruction was over. Let the heavy weight of that long-ago morning softly drift away from your mind now. The flash is in the past. The ash has long since washed away into the sea. The green shoots grew back, the trees returned, and the world learned how to breathe again in the quiet that followed. You are safe in the present. You are far removed from the sudden light and the terrifying shadows. Look into the dark of your own room. The darkness here is not frightening, it is a soft, comforting blanket. It is a quiet sanctuary where no alarms will sound. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your chest. With every breath in, draw the cool, peaceful air of the night into your lungs. With every breath out, release the lingering heaviness of the history we have walked through. Let the sorrow of the past dissolve into the gentle mist of your own calm. The world has survived its darkest nights, and the dawn has come. You do not need to carry the weight of the universe. You only need to rest. Close your eyes. Let the soft, steady rhythm of your breathing rock you like a gentle wave. Drift now, smoothly and peacefully, into the quiet, starlit safety of sleep. Good night. There is a silence so profound that it rings in the ears, a heavy, disorienting quiet that falls when the world finally stops breaking. Imagine a bay, its waters as calm and smooth as polished jade, reflecting the pale, early morning sky. Resting on this mirror of water is a massive ship, a floating fortress of gray steel that has spent years speaking only in the deafening, terrifying language of fire. But today, its great guns are silent. They are pointed away, resting quietly in the warm, humid air of the late summer. On the vast, wooden deck of this ship, a young sailor stands perfectly still. He is wearing his immaculate white uniform, the fabric stiff with starch, his black shoes shining in the morning sun. He is standing shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of other boys just like him. They are holding their breath. He watches as a group of older men walk slowly up the wooden gangway. Some wear the dark, heavy uniforms of a defeated empire, their faces drawn, their eyes fixed on the wooden planks beneath their boots. Others wear the crisp, decorated uniforms of the victors. They walk past the massive, silent cannons and gather around a simple, folding table covered with a green cloth. On that table rests a large, leather-bound folder. And beside it, a small, elegant fountain pen. The young sailor watches the pen. It is such a tiny, fragile thing. It is made of brass and ink, light enough to be held by 2 fingers. For years, he has watched the world try to solve its pain with thousands of planes, millions of tons of explosive steel, and the endless, roaring engines of tanks. He has lived in a universe where power was measured by how loud the destruction could be. But now, he watches a man lean over the table. The man picks up the pen. The only sound on the vast, crowded deck is the gentle, scratching whisper of a metal nib moving across thick parchment. In that soft, scratching sound, an entire global storm is brought to a halt. The young sailor feels a sudden, unexpected tightness in his throat. He realizes that the great, terrible machine of the Axis Empire, which had seemed so invincible, so terrifyingly vast, is not being dismantled by a final, cinematic explosion. It is being dismantled by a signature. It is being ended by the quiet, heavy weight of the pen. The arrogance of the conquerors had finally met the reality of their defeat, and they were signing their surrender in silence. Thousands of miles away, the sun is just beginning to rise over a small, quiet town. In a modest kitchen, a woman sits at her wooden table, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm tea. On the counter, her small radio crackles with static, carrying the voices from the other side of the world. She listens to the announcer describe the scene on the deck of the ship. She hears the words that she has prayed for, wept for, and hoped against hope for, every single night for years. The fighting has stopped. The papers are signed. She sets her teacup down. Her hands are shaking. She walks slowly to the window of her kitchen. For years, this window has been covered by a thick, heavy black curtain, tacked tightly to the wooden frame to ensure not a single sliver of light could escape into the night sky. It was a daily reminder of the fear that hung over their heads. With trembling fingers, she reaches up and pulls the tacks from the wood. The heavy black fabric falls to the floor with a soft thud. The morning sunlight rushes into the kitchen, warm and golden, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She closes her eyes and lets the light wash over her face. She feels a profound, staggering relief. It is a physical sensation, like a heavy, suffocating weight being lifted from her chest. She steps out onto her front porch. Down the street, her neighbors are doing the same. Doors are opening. People are stepping out into the sunlight, their faces bathed in the golden morning. There is no loud cheering, no brass bands playing in the street. There is only the sound of soft, overwhelmed weeping, and the sight of strangers wrapping their arms around one another. They are crying for the sheer, beautiful miracle that they have survived. They are crying for the boys who will finally be coming home, and they are crying for the boys who will not. The peace is here, but it is a heavy, quiet peace, bought with the deepest sorrows the world has ever known. Far away, in a quiet, misty forest on a defeated continent, the morning of peace looks very different. A young boy in a gray uniform sits on a fallen log, surrounded by the towering, silent pines. The orders have just reached his unit. The Empire has surrendered. The war is over. He looks down at the heavy, steel rifle resting across his knees. He was told that this weapon was his honor, that the empire he fought for would reign for 1,000 years. He was told that yielding was a disgrace. But sitting in the quiet damp of the forest, he feels no disgrace. He feels only a strange, hollow exhaustion, followed by a slow, creeping warmth. He stands up. He places the rifle gently on the soft, green moss at the base of a tree. He takes off his heavy steel helmet and sets it beside the gun. He unbuttons the stiff collar of his tunic, letting the cool morning breeze touch his skin. He is no longer a soldier of an arrogant machine. He is just a boy in the woods. He turns and begins to walk away from the weapons, heading down a dirt path toward the south, toward the village where he was born. He does not know what is left of his home. He does not know what kind of world he is walking into. But as he listens to the birds beginning to sing in the high branches, he realizes the most profound truth of his young life. He is alive. The grand, rigid ambitions of his leaders have been reduced to ink on a page, but his own heart is still beating. The transition from a world consumed by shadows to a world waking up to the dawn is one of the most emotional, complex moments in the human story. The relief was overwhelming, but the journey to understand what had happened, to truly comprehend the depth of the history that had just been written, was only just beginning. When we look back at these quiet moments of profound change, we realize how much we still have to learn from the people who lived them. History is not just a collection of dates, it is a tapestry of personal quiet moments, of letters written in the dark, and of blackout curtains finally falling to the floor. If you find peace and fascination in exploring these deep, emotional layers of the past, I warmly invite you to join our community over on Patreon. It is a quiet, dedicated space where we share free, deep-dive podcasts, explore raw and unblurred historical footage, and support the ongoing journey of historical storytelling through a gentle tip jar. It is a place to learn, to reflect, and to remember together. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. As the day of the signing slowly turns into evening, the world experiences its first true twilight of peace. On the great gray ship in the bay, the young sailor returns to his narrow bunk. The formal ceremonies are over. The dignitaries have flown away. The ship is quiet, settling into the gentle, rocking rhythm of the calm water. He pulls out a piece of pale blue writing paper and his own fountain pen. He clicks the cap off and begins to write a letter to his mother. For years, his letters have been carefully worded to hide his fear. They have been filled with forced cheerfulness, talking about the weather and the food, trying to protect her from the terrifying realities of the ocean. But tonight, his hand moves smoothly across the page. He does not have to hide anything anymore. He writes, "Mom, it's finally over. I watched them sign the papers today. The sky is so clear tonight, and for the first time since I left home, I am not afraid of the dark. I am packing my sea bag. I am coming home to you." He folds the letter. He feels a tear escape and slide down his cheek, but it is not a tear of sorrow. It is a tear of pure, unadulterated joy. He climbs up to the main deck and looks out over the bay. In the distance, on the shores of the defeated nation, small lights are beginning to flicker on. For years, those shores were hidden in absolute darkness, wrapped in the same fear that covered the rest of the world. But tonight, a lantern is lit in a window. A street lamp flickers to life. The light is returning to the world, one tiny, quiet bulb at a time. The Axis lost because they believed they could extinguish the light of human freedom with force. They believed that noise and steel could permanently silence the gentle, ordinary hopes of everyday people. They forced the world to carry an unimaginable burden, pushing humanity to the very edge of the abyss. But humanity did not break. It endured the cold, it endured the mud, and it endured the long, terrifying nights. And when the final, arrogant bluff was called, the empire crumbled, leaving nothing behind but the quiet scratching of a pen on parchment. The weight of the pen was heavier than the weight of 1,000 cannons. It was the collective will of a weary, bruised, but unbroken world declaring that the storm was finally over. Let the profound, heavy relief of that day settle over you now. The war of the past is closed, sealed away in the archives of history. You are safe in the present. You are in a place where the lights can shine brightly, where the windows do not need to be covered, and where the sky holds no threats. Listen to the absolute quiet of your own room. It is a beautiful, hard-won peace. Feel the softness of your blankets wrapping around you, a gentle embrace that asks nothing of you but to rest. Take a long, slow breath in, filling your lungs with the calm, still air of the evening. As you exhale, let go of any lingering worries. Let the tension in your shoulders melt away. Let the thoughts of the day fade into the background. The papers are signed. The struggle is done. The world is at rest, and so are you. Close your eyes, let the gentle, rocking motion of peace carry you, and drift softly into a deep, beautiful, and dreamless sleep. Good night. Time softens the deepest scars, leaving only the quiet grass to remember where the heavy boots once fell. Imagine a meadow, bathed in the soft, golden light of a late summer afternoon. The air is warm and smells of sweet clover, sun-baked earth, and the faint, dusty fragrance of Queen Anne's lace. The wind moves through the tall grass in slow, rolling waves, a gentle ocean of green and gold that stretches out toward the horizon. It is a place of profound, undisturbed peace. Only the gentle hum of honeybees and the distant, melodic call of a meadowlark break the absolute quiet. If you did not know the history of this soil, you would simply see a beautiful, empty field. But walking slowly along the edge of this meadow is an older man. He leans comfortably on a wooden walking stick, his steps measured and careful. His hair is the color of the winter frost, and his hands, resting on the smooth wood of the cane, are lined with the deep, beautiful maps of a very long life. He stops and looks out over the swaying grass. He does not see an empty field. In his mind's eye, the golden afternoon dissolves, just for a moment, into a gray, freezing dawn from a lifetime ago. He remembers when this earth was not covered in clover, but was torn apart by iron and ash. He remembers the deafening noise, the heavy, numbing cold, and the sheer, terrifying weight of the world he was asked to carry when he was just a boy. He remembers the faces of the friends who stood beside him in the mud, boys who will forever remain young in his memory, their laughter perfectly preserved in the amber of the past. But as he stands there, a sudden, bright sound pulls him back to the present. It is the sound of pure, unburdened laughter. Running through the tall grass, their arms outstretched, are his two young grandchildren. They are chasing a brilliantly colored paper kite that dances and dips in the summer breeze. Their faces are flushed with the simple, exquisite joy of the afternoon. They do not know the sounds of the sirens. They have never had to look up at a darkening sky with a knot of terror in their chests. They have never known the sharp, biting ache of a winter spent in a frozen trench, or the terrifying silence of an ocean filled with shadows. To them, the sky is just a blue canvas for their kite, and the earth is just a soft place to run. The old man watches them, and a slow, deep smile touches his eyes. A profound warmth spreads through his chest. This, he realizes, is the true victory. The Axis powers had tried to build an empire of stone and steel, a rigid, unyielding monument to their own arrogance. They had believed that true power was the ability to make the world tremble, to force humanity to march in lockstep under a heavy, darkened sky. They wrote grand speeches about a 1,000-year reign, measuring their success in conquered miles and shattered cities. But their fatal flaw was their absolute blindness to the simple, quiet desires of the human heart. They did not understand the baker who simply wanted to rise in the misty dawn and knead his dough in peace. They did not understand the exhausted young pilot who only wanted to go home to his sweetheart's garden. They did not understand the mother folding a paper crane, or the old woman offering an apple to a stranger in the rain, or the millions of ordinary people who simply wanted to live their lives without fear. The conquerors believed that everyday people were soft, that a love for simple things was a weakness to be exploited. But it was exactly this love that formed an unbreakable, invisible wall against which the Axis machine completely shattered. The people of the world did not fight for glory, or for the conquest of new lands. They fought so that one day, decades in the future, their grandchildren could run through a meadow and never once have to worry about what might be hiding in the grass. As the years continue to pass, the footprints of that terrible era are fading. The trenches have been filled in by the rain and the falling leaves. The concrete bunkers on the beaches are slowly crumbling into the sea, softened by the relentless, gentle patience of the tide. And the generations who lived through the storm are quietly, gracefully stepping into the shadows of history. There is a bittersweet beauty in this fading. It is what they fought for, after all, for the scars to heal, for the world to move forward into the light. But as the physical reminders of the past slowly return to the earth, there is a risk that the quietest, most hidden stories of their heroism might fade away with them. So much of the world was saved not on the grand, loud battlefields, but in the absolute dark, by people who operated in total secrecy, whose names were never written in the history books, and whose quiet sacrifices remain hidden in the shadows. Reflecting on the fading legacy of the war makes it all the more important that we find ways to stay connected to those untold stories of hidden heroism. If you feel a gentle calling to remember those who fought in the quiet dark, I warmly invite you to join my email newsletter. When you welcome my letters into your inbox, I will send you a completely free copy of my ebook, The Shadow War: 5 Top Secret Operations That Shaped World War II. It is a quiet, respectful place where we can keep the memories of these unseen heroes alive, ensuring their fading footprints are never entirely lost to the grass. Please, to keep yourself safe, only use the secure link I've placed in the description below. If you try to search for this on the internet, the top results are unfortunately often fake websites designed to scam you, and I want to make sure you are protected. The sun begins to dip low on the horizon, casting long, stretching shadows across the meadow. The air cools, and the sky turns the soft, bruised colors of twilight, deep lavender, rose, and a fading, gentle peach. The old man calls out to his grandchildren. His voice is soft, but it carries easily on the quiet evening air. They reel in their kite, their small hands working the string, and run back to him, their cheeks pink, breathing heavily with the happy exhaustion of play. He takes each of them by the hand. His hands are large, rough from a lifetime of work, but his grip is incredibly gentle. Together, they turn and begin to walk back toward the small, warmly lit farmhouse in the distance. As they walk, the old man looks down at the grass beneath his boots. He knows that his own footprints are light now, pressing only softly into the earth. His time, and the time of all those who carried the great burden of the war, is slowly drawing to a close. But as he feels the small, warm hands of his grandchildren tucked safely inside his own, he feels absolutely no sorrow. He feels only a vast, oceanic peace. They did what they had to do. They held the line in the snow, they crossed the freezing oceans, and they endured the dark so that the light could return. The world they saved is not perfect, for no world built by human hands ever is. But it is a world where the grass can grow tall, where a little girl can chase a kite, and where a grandfather can walk home in the twilight without looking over his shoulder. The arrogance of the Axis powers was a loud, terrifying storm, but like all storms, it eventually ran out of breath. It blew itself apart against the deep, quiet, unshakable roots of human love. The story of the war is not a story of the triumph of machines. It is the story of the triumph of the ordinary. It is the proof that the desire to build, to comfort, and to love is infinitely stronger than the desire to destroy. They walk up the wooden steps of the porch. The screen door opens with a familiar, comforting squeak. Inside, the house smells of roasting vegetables and warm bread. The lamps are lit, casting a golden, protective glow against the gathering night outside. The old man hangs his walking stick on a hook by the door. He takes off his coat. He is home. And now, your own journey through this long, quiet history has also come to its end. The marching has stopped. The oceans are calm. The skies are entirely clear, filled only with the quiet, ancient light of the stars. The great, terrible noise of the past has faded into a soft, whispering breeze that can no longer harm you. Look around your own room in your mind. The shadows here are not hiding anything. They are just the soft, restful edges of the night, inviting you to let go of your own day. You are safe. You are surrounded by the peace that so many brave, quiet souls fought to secure for you. You do not need to carry their burdens anymore. You only need to accept the gift of their endurance. Feel the comforting weight of your blanket settling over you. Let your muscles release their hold. Feel your shoulders drop, your jaw soften, and your breathing fall into a slow, easy, natural rhythm. With every breath in, draw the quiet peace of the evening into your body. With every breath out, release any lingering thoughts, any small worries, any tension that you have carried through the day. Let them drift away, floating out into the night like a kite let off its string, disappearing into the dark. The grass has grown back. The footprints have faded. The world is at rest. Close your eyes. Let the absolute stillness of the night completely envelop you. Drift now, softly, gently, and peacefully, into a deep, beautiful, and unbroken sleep. Good night.